The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The season, the 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great.
Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
Back-to-back days where we got the full crew.
Wow.
Maybe not in studio because I wasn't in studio yesterday, but back-to-back days with the full crew. How about that?
Vibes are high.
Yeah, we're on a roll right now. Welcome in, everybody. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kenner, Casey McCollister in the producer chair, and he's rocking, of course, the Chatterbox Sports blue Nike hoodie, everybody.
Big time. Yeah. I need to get on this Chatterbox merch wave that Casey and Reed are on. Maybe I just
feel like they hog it all.
They have some great merch that
do.
I've just never seen anywhere else than their two bodies.
Yeah, over the years, I've been here for almost 3 years now, or maybe it has been 3 years. I just accumulate old merch, new merch, and this is one of their older
it's a good piece.
Chatterbox shirts. Yeah, I love it.
So are these like for sale? Or are these like available somewhere?
See, that's the really fun thing about Chatterbox merch is it just appears.
It really does.
And it only appears in Reed and Casey's closet. And no one else.
I haven't been around long enough to like start going through boxes. I'm like, maybe there's boxes of apparel that we're just not privy to.
Yeah.
You know? But
no. I've looked. I've scoured that basement for boxes.
Well, I don't know if either of the bosses are listening, but there is an event coming up very, very soon that most of us will be at that is pretty important for our Chatterbox
That's
brand.
right.
So maybe we all get matching shirts then.
Ooh.
And then you start your own collection.
There we go.
Yeah. That's what happens.
Who
with
makes
me.
the shirts? I mean, our studio is inside of a shirt-making company.
That's true.
I don't know if we could just yell out the
That's
door,
true.
hey, I need a shirt.
I think people do forget that a little bit.
I don't know who we use, but it seemed like it'd be convenient just to look out there. I have no idea.
I don't know. Well, I'll have to ask around for it. But
Fair enough. Everyone that tunes into a radio show is just so interested in the apparel.
That's right.
That everyone's wearing.
Well, I do think there are some listeners out there that are interested in finding some Chatterbox merch. I think there's a market segment out there for that.
I think some of the hosts are interested in some of this.
I think so.
I think we all are. But you look great today, Casey. So welcome. Speaking of looking great, never is not looking great. Even making the Kansas hoodie look great.
I'm just wearing all blue today. I decided I'm going to wear all blue for some
Different
reason.
tints of blue, but yes, all blue.
Yeah,
nonetheless.
it's different shades of blue. Nobody said I was a good dresser, but I'm wearing blue today.
Repping your Big 12 basketball champions pick.
That's correct. I am
the conference that your own team plays in.
Correct. Well, I'm not going to be cheering for it per se, but I do have a wager on Kansas to win the Big 12, and it's a good bet. I think I parlayed it with Orioles live minus 8.5 in a mid-May game. It was
big time payout.
Fun little parlay. $5.
Can you cash out right now by any chance?
No, it
Did
won't
you
let
learn
me
your
cash
lesson?
out. $5. Actually, I think it will let me cash out, but it's like 5 to win like 4, and I can't. and I can't make that cash out. I might start cashing out everything now though.
To recuperate some of your losses, nonetheless. And we got another blue hoodie
That's
over
right.
here, Mr.
We
Jacob
didn't plan
Tissot,
this,
ladies
but
and
it's blue
gentlemen.
day.
All blue.
Casey's blue.
All blue.
It's all blue. Blue all around. I love that, but I'm not feeling blue. I'm feeling good.
You're feeling good. You're feeling like the sun.
Chipper.
So you're an Ohio State fan. Where's your Oregon hoodie? You're an Alabama fan. Where's your Tennessee hoodie?
That's right. Yeah, I guess I don't.
You
I don't
gotta
own.
rock it the way Elliot does.
I don't
right
own.
there.
I don't own conference rivals hoodies, but that's just me.
All right. Well, we got. I guess we could start the show. Have you hit record yet? Have we started?
yeah, we started.
Oh, I didn't know.
I can always restart.
I thought we were just
Run the
know.
intro?
Yeah, but we welcome you guys. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. We got some baseball stuff we'll dive into here shortly. The Dan Patrick Show. Rob Manfred just did a hit on the Dan Patrick Show, and he was asked couple key questions that I thought his responses were very interesting, including that of one Mr. Pete Rose. Now, a lot of people keep mentioning the fact that they are really calling out the hypocrisy of baseball every time you look. And by the way, we could be watching Cincinnati Reds baseball on FanDuel TV next year. And people right away start calling out Major League Baseball for the hypocrisy of, you have all these sports books branded all over the place throughout Major League Baseball, but yet Pete Rose was banned from baseball for, of course, betting on baseball. Dan Patrick asked him his thoughts on what does he say to his listeners who keep calling out baseball for their hypocrisy. So I thought Rob Manfred had a great response. We'll get to that coming up here around the corner. He also let it be known some key information regarding the automatic balls and strike system that could be coming to Major League Baseball a lot sooner than you think. We'll get to all of that coming up. Plus college football, the SEC versus the Big Ten. That's always the big debate, right? But now that we're more than halfway through the season at this point, which conference has been more impressive? We'll get to that. Major League Baseball, World Series talk coming up around the corner. Bengals and Eagles coming up this weekend. Ohio State coming back off the bye. And then, of course, you got Colorado welcoming in the Cincinnati Bearcats for a big one on Saturday night as well. So I'd say we have plenty to talk about today, right?
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
All right, cool. Well, before we get to all of that, let's see what else is going on in the world of sports as we kick it over to Elliot for Elliot's headlines.
Elliot loves three things: Joey Votto, David Bell, and leading off the bench with top headlines.
That's correct. Headlines. I'm not going to do the NBA scores. If you want to go to the NBA scores, you can look at them. But
No, I think we start NBA scores like right after the Super Bowl.
okay, that makes sense.
I think that's when the NBA season starts.
But I do have some NBA headlines. The NBA is investigating the 76ers because Joel Embiid is not playing. Load management, day one. The date is October 24th.
He will be out the first 3 games
And
of the year.
And the season just started.
Do you know who they play their 4th game of the year?
I do not.
For those that are, Joel Embiid picks his games that he's hurt and games that he's not hurt
Sure.
based on matchups. Out for the first 3 games. 4th game in Detroit against Jimmy's Pistons.
Oh, so a little welcome back party
That's right. Joel Embiid
against the
can,
worst team in the
can
league.
put up some numbers there after dodging some decent competition in the first.
This
3
is
games.
why, and again, I don't mean to be disrespectful to fans of the NBA, of fans of professional basketball, but this is why, like, the regular season doesn't matter.
He is
at
under
all.
investigation, to be fair. Like, they're
Sure.
investigating the Sixers, and they're probably going to get fined for this.
Sure, and they should be, but it's also not going to stop teams from doing
100%.
this. Everybody's going to just load management their way to the playoffs. And
Kawhi Leonard's out for an undisclosed amount of time.
Paul George, like everybody was out. It's just like the season just started. How are you not ready for the season?
Kawhi Leonard's actually retired. He just hasn't announced it
Oh,
yet. Like,
very nice.
I mean, what's going on there is wild. I mean, he went through the whole bells and whistles, little song and dance with Team USA just to get the experience of traveling with the team for a bit, and then, of course, pulled the plug on that run very quickly because he wanted to be ready for the start to the
That's
NBA
right.
season. And guess what? He's not ready for the start to the NBA season. And you're going to see throughout. It's not just that some of these guys sit out games. You'll notice a lot of times some of the stars like to sit out the big games, like going up against the best. Like there's the reason fans get mad is because at times you get excited to watch Joel Embiid against Giannis Antetokounmpo on opening night, and you don't get that. You don't get that at all, and that's the problem too. Is watch how many games that these guys miss when they're supposed to be going up maybe against another MVP candidate or somebody or a team that a lot of times you'll say, "Oh man, this is a Western Conference championship preview," and then the starters sit out of that game, and you're like, "What? It's a preview game. It's a big game. You want to establish dominance early, and then they sit out of those games." It drives me up the wall when that happens.
What's the, for the last about 3-4 years, what's been the MVP race? Embiid versus Jokic, right?
Correct.
When do you think the last time Joel Embiid played in Denver?
That's a good question. I don't
Not
know.
at home, in Denver.
I'm going to say early last year.
How about November 2019?
Oh, just a couple years ago.
That's insanity.
He has not
dude.
played in Denver since November 8th, 2019. He has played Jokic at home in Philadelphia, but he has not played in Denver since 2019. And that's the top 2 guys in the MVP race for the last 3 or 4 years. Just insane how these guys do this stuff.
I just don't get it. I don't like start the season. I know you can't, but start the season on Christmas. Make it a 40-game season because nobody cares. None of the players care about any of this. There aren't really any rivalries anymore. It's just you show up for the postseason and then we start playing basketball.
The rivalries are player-to-player rivalries, not team-to-team rivalries.
Correct.
Like when the Lakers play the Warriors, I still kind of characterize that as a rivalry just because it's LeBron and Curry. But
Yeah.
obviously the Lakers and the Warriors don't have a rivalry. I think that's a unique piece of the NBA that's a little weird.
Zachary Risache.
That's right.
Nailed that one.
Number 1 pick.
2 for 8 from the floor in his debut with the Hawks, but he did make his first shot for what it was worth.
Very nice.
The Heat dedicated their home court, to Pat Riley. So it'll now be Pat Riley court. How about that? Other news, NC State quarterback Grayson McCall announces he was retiring from football after another concussion. So, Tua, other guys are doing it. Kennesaw State, 27-point underdogs. They get the win over Liberty to get their first FBS win in program history.
That's right. It's the first time since 2001 that an 0-5 or worse team defeated a team 5-0 or better.
Yeah.
According to 24/7, Kennesaw State has the least talented roster of non-service academies. Obviously, Army, Navy, Air Force have a lot of stringent requirements on recruits, but outside of them, Kennesaw State, the least talented FBS football team, and Liberty, first in Conference USA by a wide margin. Liberty's head coach makes $4 million a year.
Oh, boy.
Highest paid Group of 5 coach by over $1.5 million. And Kennesaw State's head coach makes $370,000 a year. Whew. So great win for that program. It's going to help them hopefully build in still just a very young team in terms of FBS football. I believe they're second year up, so great building block for that school.
Liberty moneyline bettors are in shambles, minus 4,000. NFL, Brandon Aubrey, he missed practice because he has been selected to be on a jury for a felony case. So if you're a fan of the Dallas Cowboys and you're thinking about, oh, we got Sunday game, nope, maybe not. Brandon Aubrey, jury duty. They did say, for what it was worth, they did say he'd probably be available to play. But it would be very funny to have the best kicker in the NFL miss a game for jury duty.
I saw a beat reporter, and I forget where it was from, but I did double-check to make sure it was a real beat reporter. I think it was The Athletic. Said that we don't see this happen very often because you can just say you're in the NFL.
Yeah.
And he didn't.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So now he's at jury duty and missing practice.
I did see that last night, and that's absolutely insane.
Have any of you had jury duty before?
I have not, no. I would
Nope.
love it. I want it
not.
so bad.
I have not.
I've gotten
Free
notices
lunch.
a few times, and then you call.
Sit in an air-conditioned room all day?
You always have to call like the morning before or the
Yeah.
morning of, and then every time I've done that, they've just said your services are no longer needed, and I kind of look forward to it. They don't pay a lot, but they pay more than radio, so I always look forward to the option to potentially do that. But nonetheless. But yeah, no jury duty for me.
Tennis news. Maria Sharapova and the Bryan brothers were named into the International Tennis Hall of Fame. So if you're a fan of tennis, 3 legends there. The Bryan brothers, I think they're the most successful doubles duo in tennis history. So
They were incredible in their prime.
Good for them. But those, as of right now, it's 10:14. Those are your headlines.
And there you go. There you go. Again, Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410, Wing AM in Dayton. That was Elliot's headlines. Right off the bat, I did want to say, because yesterday we talked about Bronny making his debut and going out there with LeBron. I will say, J.J. Redick might be my favorite head coach in the NBA right now, and it's only one game in. I think that. What do you think? How do you think J.J. Redick's going to do? Not just because they got the win in the debut. But, like, you could literally already see in the NBA, it's tough at times to see a difference that a coach makes. I think that a lot of sports right now, pro sports, with the way that money has just exploded for professional athletes, I don't think it's a coincidence that we talk all the time in sports about how coaches and managers in baseball mean as little today as what they used to, because the money's exploded and there's just real no face in that huddle that these players are going to look at and actually look at them as being above them. That just doesn't happen in today's NBA. When I was growing up, the head coaches were as big as stars as the players half the time, whether it was Jerry Sloan in Utah or Pat Riley in Miami or the Lakers, and you had Phil Jackson. I mean, the list goes on and on with how many great coaches there were. They were as big as stars as the players. Now, I don't think you could name 5 head coaches in the NBA. And I think that's very interesting because, again, these coaches are getting fired almost every other year. There's no longevity with it outside of Steve Kerr. Obviously, Greg Popovich still there, no doubt. But, I mean, you have head coaches who win an NBA championship and will get canned. You'll have NBA coaches who win NBA Coach of the Year and get canned, and they're free agent coaches as they're accepting the Coach of the Year award. That's happened in recent years. It doesn't make any sense. But last night, or on opening night when I was tuning in to watch Bronny and LeBron, the one thing I noticed right off the bat is just how different the Los Angeles Lakers looked, just because they were running sets, they were accepting coaching, smart timeouts. I think J.J. Redick's going to be a hell of an NBA coach.
I certainly hope so. I like rooting for him, and it seems like the players like playing for him. I thought it was cool after the game. He said he was going to email the league and ask for more worn-in basketballs because they're easier to shoot. I think he's a fun personality to watch in the league, and like you said, in a league that's lacking interesting coaching storylines, I think he certainly will provide one all year long, and it'll be fun to watch.
I did see this, not to go too far off the subject, I'm very sorry. Did you see the Clippers student section that they added into the games?
It's really cool.
That's a good move by Ballmer.
And
that's
he's
a good
there.
move.
He doesn't
He's
know
leading
how
the charge.
to celebrate,
No, he
enjoy
does not.
himself at a sporting event. He has no idea how to do that.
No clue how to do that, but it's very funny. So if you don't know what we're talking about, they're calling it the wall. It's right behind the baseline, and no opposing fans are allowed in there. So it's just home fans, and they're crazy. I love that.
You said it's called the Wall?
It's called the wall.
The Wall. All right. So again, it's 51 uninterrupted rows of fans. All right, fans, there's rules for the wall. And so it's 51 uninterrupted rows of fans. I saw the highlights of it last night. I mean, it was like they're trying to create like a college basketball atmosphere at NBA games. NBA games could be a little stuffy at times, right? Like, especially with all the player movement all the time, just like in college, which is ironic that they're wanting a college basketball atmosphere. But like they're trying to create that, and I think it worked right off the bat. Now, can they get that for every single home game, 40 plus home games this season? We'll see. 51 uninterrupted rows of fans. They cannot cheer for the opposing team. So if obviously if the Bucks are coming to Los Angeles and playing at the Clippers, Bucks fans cannot sit in that section, or you cannot cheer that section. You cannot wear opponent's gear. So if you're going to watch Giannis Antetokounmpo, you cannot wear an Antetokounmpo jersey and sit in that section. That's kind of wild. Tickets can only be resold in Clippers marketplace as a way to try to, keep that in-house a little bit. But is that wild that, again, you can only cheer for the home team, which should not be that crazy of an ask of a home crowd. But again, with basketball being so star-driven, again, with the individual players, especially coming into the arena maybe once, twice a season, it is wild. You cannot wear the other team's gear. I found that kind of interesting.
How many rows was it in there?
51.
51 rows. That's a lot of fans.
Is that right?
That's a lot of fans on the wall.
Uninterrupted. There's no little concourse, gap or anything.
Noted massive fan base, Los Angeles Clippers, keeping out opposing fans in LA. I wonder, it looked great on opening night. It's probably going to look great for about a week or so.
And then
what happens when they're 31 and 51?
It still might be there. That might be actually the only section that's like sold out.
I don't know if that many fans are going to go to the games on Wednesday
No,
night.
but like it's like TV time for these people. So they'll be like, all right, we can get our shot. Maybe they're all actors.
But how bad is that wall going to look on the 5:30 Tuesday night games?
Yeah, it won't look
Wednesday
great.
night games.
It won't look great.
Some more details on this. The wall is a section of 51 rows of uninterrupted seats, as we talked about. And it's located right behind the visiting team's bench.
Love that.
So there's that, or at least on the side of the visiting team. The section can hold up to 4,500 fans.
Yeah, I mean,
Season,
what are we doing?
Season passes for the wall range from $5,000 to $25,000. The ultimate wall pass cost $1,299 for one ticket per game.
Wow.
Again, I love the concept, and I think you're going to start to see more NBA, the newer NBA arenas that do pop up, and they're not popping up as often as what we're seeing NFL stadiums pop up at this point. But I think this is going to be something that's emulated more times than not. But yeah, when I saw, and oh, by the way, no profanity. Fans cannot use derogatory language, insult, or harass the team. Players, coaches, owners, employees, contractors.
The wall does seem
the wall might stink.
Yeah,
the wall seems kind of boring.
The wall might stink. So you're telling me that I'm not even going to get to sit next to an opposing fan, and I can't yell at the players on the court, but I also can only root for my team.
Correct.
Not for me.
Well, you see other sports start to adopt this. I think soccer does. A buddy of mine went to
FC Cincinnati does.
FC Columbus, so FC Cincinnati here, but Columbus Crew, not FC Columbus. Columbus Crew match, and they had the opposing team's gear on, and the section that they bought the tickets, they would not let them in that section wearing the opposing team's gear. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, they can't do that, can they? But apparently this is the same concept. So there you go. There you go. All right, more off the bench when we come back. Pete Rose obviously was banned from baseball for his entire life from 1989 and onwards, of course. But yet baseball continues to lie in bed with everything sports gambling related. And Rob Manfred was asked about that on the Dan Patrick Show. Dan Patrick basically just said, hey, what do you say to the fans that call out the hypocrisy of baseball, or that say you're a hypocrite for, again, having branded sports marketing or sports gambling content across the board, but yet you continue to keep Pete Rose out of the Hall of Fame throughout the entirety of his life post-suspension, of course? His response, kind of interesting. We'll get to that when we come back. Don't go anywhere. Justin Kenner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. One point, I know when we talked a lot of Pete Rose about a month ago, a couple weeks ago, when when he had passed away, one thing that constantly got brought up, of course, was the lifetime ban from baseball, not being in the Hall of Fame. And the one thing, Elliot, that I know you continue to bring up all the time was just the hypocrisy of baseball. It's not a good look. You continue to keep him out of baseball, continue to keep him out of the Hall of Fame because he bet on baseball, all while telling fans, go watch baseball and the FanDuel parlay before each game. Now we're going to most likely be watching Reds games on FanDuel TV.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy is something that a lot of fans bring up, including you.
I just think that I think that a sport that's so famously against sports gambling, and let's be clear, against gambling on baseball, I think to have so many sportsbook sponsor games, to have a parlay about your team every single night sponsored on the show, it's just strange to me. And that's the world we live in. It's a gambling world. Sports gambling it's never been more involved in our culture than it is right now. And yet at the same time, if you gamble on baseball, if you gamble on the sport you're playing, these players are terminated. They're gone. They're wiped. Whatever the NBA guy was last year,
Jonte
Porter. And again, it just leaves the door open, in my opinion, for something that you don't want. It leaves that door open for tanking or for intentionally throwing games. I think that door is set open once you allow that sports books can be everywhere. LeBron's in a DraftKings commercial, but not for basketball. It's just for NFL. It's just strange to me. It's just a strange thing. And I get it. It's a very simple rule. Don't bet on your sport and you're fine. Don't bet on your sport and you're fine. But eventually I feel like those lines get crossed and guys will do whatever they want. Because gambling's okay. Gambling's okay. Look, our outfield wall. 6 different sports books out there.
So
it's just a strange thing to me.
I've never looked at it as being that hypocritical only because, and I've already seen it in the chat, and let me go make sure I give credit where credit's due. I know some of these are moving up, but it was something about, the players aren't allowed to drink, but yet there's alcohol banners all over the place. And that's what I've always said, too, about this. I don't think it's hypocritical at all. I think that it's a simple rule. It's not that they tell the players you're not allowed to gamble. You're just not allowed to gamble on baseball. And I think that's an okay ask of Major League Baseball. I think that's a fair ask of the NBA, the NFL. I don't think it's that crazy for them to look at their athletes and say, hey, you don't need to bet on the sport you play in when you have a lot of knowledge and a lot of ways that can, basically taint the integrity of the game. And we've seen that happen. I mean, right away, we didn't give Pete the benefit of the doubt that he bet on his team to win. We just said, "Oh, what were you messing with lineups? Were you only betting on the Reds to win?" Now he swears that he did during that stretch, of course, and many people have believe him at this time. But bottom line is he bet on baseball. And we bring this up because, for instance, there's a lot of alcohol advertisements throughout the NBA, throughout the NFL, throughout Major League Baseball. And players aren't allowed to have a Bud Light sitting on the bench, or during a timeout, instead of a Gatorade bottle, they're there chugging a shotgun and a beer or whatever. Oh, wait, NBA, you're going to get mad at me for drinking a beer? Look at all this Bud Light, banners you have all over the place. I think it's hypocritical. That's how I view it with this, although I do understand how uncomfortable it makes people because baseball is different than the others because it's bad. But gambling is bad. And that's how they've kept Pete Rose out. But now they're as much in bed with it as any other sport out there. So I definitely understand where people are coming from when they say it's hypocritical. I just don't view it as that because it's not like they're saying you can't bet on sports. They're saying you can't bet on baseball. I think that's a fair ask considering the money that these players make and the chance to be a professional athlete. But I get both sides, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to side a little bit more with you in terms of the hypocrisy aspect of it, but I do think with the current players and with the Pete Rose discussion, I think it's 2 different things. Mm-hmm. I think once you start doing the partnerships, and I mean, we're airing Reds games on FanDuel Sportsbook now.
Yeah.
I think at that point, we need to look at the guys like Pete Rose a little differently. But I 100% agree with you. Just because you're sponsored by FanDuel and DraftKings and Caesars and MGM and all those, there's no reason that means baseball players should be allowed to gamble on baseball. Yeah. And that also doesn't, just because baseball players aren't allowed to gamble on baseball, doesn't mean that I don't think the MLB should be able to partner with sports books. Like, I think those 2 things are very different. I definitely agree with you there. But I do think all of these sports book partnerships and how they keep progressing and getting bigger and bigger and more influence in the game does go back to the Pete Rose conversation of how are you keeping a guy out for gambling on baseball when you are promoting gambling on baseball. And the other thing with the Pete Rose conversation that I think always gets lost in the shuffle is he only gambled on it as a manager. Why aren't we just putting him in as the player?
Yeah.
That's two different things. We see players put in as just managers and managers put in as just players and all that stuff all the time across all sports. Keep the manager, Pete Rose, out for gambling on baseball if you'd like to do that, but the player belongs.
It's for me, it's one of those things that, like, Pete Rose will have some sort of tribute on opening day. There'll be some sort of Pete Rose tribute that will be broadcast, and if that broadcast is live streamed on FanDuel Sportsbook, I think that's a strange look.
I agree.
I just think it's weird to me, and I think it's a little bit hypocritical. I do. I get the whole point. There's beer sponsors. You can't get drunk while playing baseball. There's gambling sponsors. You can't gamble on baseball while playing baseball. I get it. I understand it. But baseball is historically against baseball, gambling on baseball. But yet, the promotion of every other fan to do it, it's a little bit different. It's strange to me. So I did think the point of this, by the way, I did see him say that he's going to try to get rid of the prop baseball gambling. I don't know if you saw that.
Who said that?
Brad Manfred on this interview.
Yep.
Said that he's going to try to get rid of betting on player props. So I think if you start to go that way, it'll be wild. But I think it's probably the best.
No, not me. Don't get rid of player props.
Well, we've seen that start already.
With
the NBA.
Did they do that?
The NBA has done away with unders for any player on a 10-day or two-way contract.
Yeah.
So any player that's not on a full NBA contract, you can no longer bet their unders. So that's at least a start of, I mean, we've already seen it with college, but they framed that as they're not professional athletes. You shouldn't be able to put the onus on one player because they hate DMs and everything like that for an 18.
Which I agree with.
100%. I think it is a different conversation because I don't think that applies at all to professional athletes.
Yeah.
I think the only conversation that should be involved with prop betting on professional sports is whether or not it can affect the outcome of the game and the integrity of the sport. If we think it does, then we should do away with prop betting.
Yep.
It's pretty point blank, I think. If there's any statistics that say that prop betting swings the win-loss and outcome of games and integrity of the sport, it should be gone. And I'm a huge prop better. I love prop betting.
Yep.
We sit here and stream Reds games. We prop bet every at-bat.
Every single
It's
at-bat.
the most fun thing in the world. But if it's going to, change pro sports to be more of a movie or TV show than actual sports where you don't know who's going to win and you don't know what's going to happen, then I think getting away with it would not be the worst thing.
Yeah, you see it in the NFL where some players are cognizant of some of the prop bets.
Yeah.
You'll
Antonio
have
Pierce.
Yes.
Down 8 this weekend, kicks a field goal, down 8 with 2 minutes left.
Yep.
Covers the spread.
And some players will let it slip that, hey, I was aware of what the touchdown total was or the anytime touchdown score. And some, when the game's out of reach, they'll just run out of bounds as opposed to running into the end zone, which is wild. And that's how much they want to stick it to fans is that aspect of it. But so Rob Manfred was on the Dan Patrick Show. Dan Patrick said, hey, well, while I have you here, what do I say to the Elliots of the world? What do I say to the fans of the world that find it very hypocritical of Rob Manfred of Major League Baseball to continue to push the sports gambling initiative across the board, but also kept Pete Rose out of baseball from '89 on, and of course kept him out of the Hall of Fame because he did what baseball's big initiative is now pushing, which is gambling, sports gambling, betting on baseball. Here's what Rob Manfred had to say in response to Dan Patrick.
Oh, boo.
Oh, Rubens.
Oh, boo.
We're buffering.
Casey.
This is unfortunate.
We're buffering.
We're buffering. Well, I mean, how long does it normally take to buffer?
I feel like it's a long buffer.
Oh, my goodness.
And we're back.
And we're And so Rob Manfred was on the Dan Patrick Show. He was asked, of course, about what do you say to fans who find it very hypocritical that you kept Pete Rose out of baseball once he was caught gambling on baseball, but yet continue to push all these sports gambling initiatives across Major League Baseball? Here's what Rob Manfred had to say, Major League Baseball commissioner. I promise it was a doozy, folks. I promise it was a doozy, nonetheless. But it's all right. We'll try to get that fixed, nonetheless. But I'll give you the Cliff Notes version as we try to get that addressed. Basically going on to say baseball is a privilege. Playing baseball is a privilege.
Yeah.
And that, that basically also going on to say that, hey, we didn't ask you not to gamble, or we didn't ask you not to gamble on all sports across the board. We just asked you not to gamble on baseball. And he thinks that's a fair request, and that playing Major League Baseball is a privilege and nonetheless. So you got it fixed, Case? We're good?
Yeah.
I think we're good.
I think we're good.
All right, let's try this one more time. Rob Manfred asked about, is it hypocritical to push all these sports gambling initiatives all while keeping Pete Rose out of baseball and the Hall of Fame since he was found to have betted on baseball back in 1989? Here's Rob Manfred on the Dan Patrick Show.
All right, I want you to answer this so I don't have to answer it anymore. When my audience says, yeah, but baseball is in bed with gambling, and so aren't they being hypocritical with Pete Rose?
Yeah, here's how I think about that. I think it's a privilege to work in Major League Baseball and to be a Major League Baseball player. Often, when you have a privilege, it comes with obligations. The obligation in this case is to stay away from gambling because involvement with gambling by people who work in the game and can influence outcomes reflects and presents a threat to the integrity of the game. So that's a category of people. Fans are different. The government, in this case, the Supreme Court, paved the way for legalization of sports betting. Fans want to engage with the game in that way. They present no threat to the integrity of the game or a minimal threat to the integrity of the game. And as a result, we have different rules that apply to those fans and have taken advantage of that business opportunity. I don't see any inconsistency between those two rules. I really don't.
Whether you agree with Rob Manfred or not, I did like the answer. I thought he explained that a lot more eloquently than I did, and most people do. I know people get, into heated debates about this. There's nothing heated about our debate or conversation with this. I actually didn't mind his response. A lot of times these commissioners will kind of tiptoe around stuff. He didn't tiptoe around it. He had a perfect answer and response for it. We don't have to like it, but at least he had a justifiable reason for why they're sticking to it. And I still agree with him more so on my side than your guys is about that. But at the end of the day, Pete Rose, it's not just about Pete Rose, but there's going to be so many scenarios moving forward where we're going to call out the hypocrisy of baseball as players continue to get busted for this, including Porter, who you talked about in the NBA, a no-name player, and it's easy to make an example out of a no-name player, but my goodness, every player in baseball that goes to maybe break the rule and gamble, and if they did that to Pete Rose was one of the biggest names in all of baseball, even 30, 40 years later, still one of the biggest names in all of baseball, and they made an example out of him. As much as baseball drives me crazy and as much as I can't stand that about it, at least it stuck to his guns. I do respect sports at times, or really anybody or any entity that sticks to its guns and doesn't just all of a sudden cave to fans and the pressure around it. To Major League Baseball's credit, whether you like it or not, they at least stick to what they believe, and they've done so for decades.
A lot of the reason, too, why Pete isn't in is because he never really owned up to it.
Right.
And he never really apologized. So that's the most important part of all this when you're talking about Pete. There was such a denial for so long. I would never gamble on the Reds. I would never gamble on the Reds. I would never gamble on the Reds to lose. I would never gamble on my team to lose games. I wanted to win. And I do kind of believe that. He had that mentality where the winning games was so fun, was so important to him. The sport of baseball was so important to him. But I do think that there are lines that are crossed, and once you open this sportsbook stuff, and it has been opened, once you have a direct support line for sports gambling, for gambling on baseball, but also telling everybody we're so against it, I just think those waters get muddied, and I get why people think they're not muddied at all. But for me personally, as I gamble on every baseball game I can, and I see every outfield billboard covered with a sports book, I think it's strange to be, you know what, if you gamble on our sport, you're done. You're out. You're out of the league. No second chances here. You're done. It's over. It's just two sides, two-faced for me.
All right, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Rob Manfred's an interesting guy because everyone seems to hate Rob Manfred. I actually think he does a very good job. I don't know how many people out there agree with that or not, but we're going to talk about that when we come back because Rob Manfred was also asked in that same interview with Dan Patrick, if you want to hit play now so it buffers enough time to when we come back. No, but he was asked about the automated ball and strike system and some other changes that could potentially be coming to Major League Baseball. And just like every year, we complain and we say leave the game alone, and then more times than not, those rules have actually made the game better. We're going to discuss that and have another clip for you from that conversation between Rob Manfred and, of course, Dan Patrick on yesterday's Dan Patrick Show. We'll be right back. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister in the producer chair today, and we have Elliot Rearing and Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. What are your guys' thoughts on Rob Manfred? Again, we just saw a clip of him kind of addressing the question of, the hypocrisy question. A lot of fans believe Rob Manfred and baseball to be hypocrites because, again, they pushed the sports gambling initiative but took such a firm stance on Pete Rose and all players who participate in betting on baseball and making sure that they're punished to the highest degree, of course. But we just heard from him there. We're going to hear another clip from him here in just a second. But your overall perception of Rob Manfred is what? Because over the years, I know he took a lot of heat, especially during the COVID lockout, of how to handle that coming out during that stretch. He's made a lot of aggressive, very progressive changes to a sport that has been so traditional and has always valued and relied on its traditional ways, of course. And it's one of those old school sports that you just don't mess with, right? While the NBA tinkers and changes a lot of things, football gets progressive with a lot of its sport as well. Baseball was one of those where you just don't touch it. You don't mess with it. You might kind of move the mound size a little bit here and there, but you don't really mess with Major League Baseball. I mean, fans lost their mind when you put nets up the first and third base line because they would much rather kids get beamed with 1,000-mile-per-hour foul balls than be safe going to a baseball game. You don't mess with baseball. But to Rob Manfred's credit, he has continued just to strive to make change after change after change to baseball. And at first, I was one of those saying leave the game alone because I didn't like initially on paper what some of those changes were. But overall, I can't think of, and people don't like the gimmicky ghost runner on second or the runner on second, an extra inning rule. I get that. But outside of that, I can't think of one rule change that he has implemented that has been bad for baseball. I think Rob Manfred's actually the most underrated commissioner in professional sports that's out there. I know that you look at Adam Silver, who gets propped up a lot. I actually think he's done a very bad job, as wild as that sounds. I like Adam Silver. I think the players respect him. I think the owners respect him. But I think if you're very liked as a commissioner, you're probably not doing your job. And I think Adam Silver's the most liked commissioner of all the sports commissioners out there. Now I'm being disrespectful. I know that, Gary Bettman, the commissioner for hockey, I don't follow hockey religiously, so I can't really fairly put them in this little diatribe of mine and fit them in with this. But I feel like Adam Silver's the most liked and respected by his players, owners, and fans. And I think that's why he's not doing a good job. I do think you have to ruffle feathers. I do think you have to make tough decisions and not always cave to the fan vote or to the owner's vote or to the player's vote. You got to do what you think is best for the sport. And to Rob Manfred's credit, I think he's done about as good a job of anybody. Baseball has improved dramatically over the years, from ticket sales to attendance to TV ratings. I think baseball's in a very healthy spot and only continuing to get better. I think Rob Manfred's done a hell of a job, but all I ever hear people when they talk about him is just bury him and say how horrible he is. I actually think Rob Manfred's pretty good.
Yeah, I side with you. I mean, I'm not a Rob Manfred fan. I don't think he's the best guy. It certainly made me mad when he said the trophy was just a piece of metal and how he handled the whole Astros thing wasn't the best. But I think he's made rule changes that any other commissioner, I would guess, would be scared to make, and they've been very, very good for the game of baseball. I was anti-pitch clock. I was anti-3-pitch minimum. I was anti-nets down the first and third baseline when it all happened. And every single change that he's made, for the most part, has been good for the game of baseball. I think he's advanced the game pretty drastically in the last few years in a short period of time. And we've seen it revive itself a little bit, which is great for the sport that was dying for a long period of time. And I think Manfred has a lot to do with that. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, and I don't think he gets it very often.
I don't like Rob Manfred, but you have to ask yourself, is baseball in a better spot today than it was 25 years ago, 30 years ago? And for me, the answer is yeah, it is. I think he's done a great job at trying to grow the game in terms of, just for example, the Field of Dreams game. I think the Field of Dreams game truly was one of the coolest sporting events that's happened in the past 35 years, 20 years. It's 2024. Since the year 2000, I'd argue it's top 3 coolest sporting event that I've ever watched. The first one. Having it done exactly like the Field of Dreams, while also making sure it's still a baseball game. It's not like a play, a musical. It's its own thing, right? It's still a baseball game, but you're still paying homage to one of the better movies about your sport. I think he's done a great job at getting more eyes on baseball. I think he's done a good job at making baseball more fun or more entertaining, more engaging to fans who say baseball is boring, baseball is slow, baseball doesn't change. I think he's changed it. I think he's trying to make it better for everybody. Saying that, I do have issues with some of the things he's done. I have an issue with him pushing the Oakland Athletics out of their stadium, out of their city, and going to a soulless city that is Las Vegas, where there will not be home fans. I have an issue with calling the World Series trophy a hunk of metal. Do you think the NHL does that with the Stanley Cup? It's the most sacred thing in hockey is the Stanley Cup. They treat that trophy with such respect and honor, and then you look at ours like, oh, it's just a piece of metal. That's tough. It's a tough look. So I'm not a fan of him, but baseball's in a better spot than it was before him.
When you say that Rob Manfred pushed the team out of Oakland, do you mean like you think like he played more of a role
Correct.
than ownership? Because
Correct.
I think he allowed it to happen. I don't know if he pushed. Because I think if
my take is that he sat idly by and watched it happen.
From
What
I read, there were owners. It was a decision by owners to move the team. Owners and Rob Manfred. There was an owner in San Diego who passed away.
Right.
That owner was trying to save the Oakland Athletics. He was trying to get owners on his side and say, we're going to keep Oakland here. We're not going to move this team out of their ballpark. It's a storied franchise. And I think once he passed away, I think Manfred stepped in, and I think he looked at other owners and said, look, all right, he's gone now. Let's move him. Let's ship him out because it'll be more money and we can get maybe more eyeballs in Las Vegas. I think that's what happened, yeah.
It's almost like a
wasn't that his
Yellowstone
job in that
series.
situation?
Maybe it is, and that's just, I guess, the crux of the issue. I don't think that you should be moving historic franchises out of their city for the name of money. But if that's his job, that's his job. I will say this: I think there's still a very big issue in terms of salary cap, salary floor, that at some point has to be figured out if you want your sport to be competitive. That's the biggest pro that the NFL has going for it, is that every team follows the same rules. You have the same opportunities, and it balances the playing field. Major League Baseball is not that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, whoever the commissioner is that ever gets baseball to agree to a floor and a ceiling for a cap would be the best commissioner in all sports of all time. Because baseball, I do think baseball could become a legit. I think it would surpass the NBA instantly if you get a salary cap.
Really?
I think it would surpass the NBA.
I'm anti-salary cap. I don't think a salary cap would be good for the sport. No, I think floor would be phenomenal. I don't think a cap is good for the sport.
I think the cap, and this is where I get why people want the salary cap, and I would rather have the cap than nothing at all. But
you made me think of something. Continue.
Making a salary cap is punishing teams who are trying.
Right. You're telling an owner with the ability to have a $300 million payroll that he can't. And I don't like that. I want to tell the poor owners that you have to spend $3 million on your team.
Or you get rid of
$100 million on your team.
I agree.
And if you're not at this threshold of money, you're gone.
And that's actually, yeah.
That's what I
agree with you. I'll change my mind on that. You're right 100%. Because what's been my biggest knock on the Guardians this entire time, $106 million payroll. And that's great that you got to the ALCS, but it's like you again, I don't need to go into the thing again. But if you put, and I think a fair floor is 150. I think 150 million is a fair floor.
I like that number.
I think 150 is a fair floor. We've seen the Reds get to that 140 range before, right? I think a couple in 19.
Close, yeah.
I think it was about 130, whatever. I think 140 to 150 would be a perfect floor for all teams to have to spend at the very least that number. You're right. I think that would help Major League Baseball. But overall, Rob Manfred, I think has done a great job. Even with just making the game. Again, he took over in, 14 or 15. He's been around for just under a decade. I think they have him through, they signed an extension a couple years ago. I think they have him through 25 or 26. We'll probably extend him again.
One thing that's interesting about the salary cap floor talk is that there are contracts in the MLB that go through 2040. So you wouldn't be able to institute a salary cap until after that point. And you'd have to say any free agent contracts at this point can't go beyond then. And then when all those current contracts are up, that's the closest point. So we're talking about 20 years almost until we get a salary cap. You could implement a floor tomorrow.
Yep. And I see AJ says, fire Jacob. MLB needs a salary cap.
I don't think you should punish owners for trying to win. I think you should punish owners for not trying to win.
I'd rather punish the poor owners than punish the rich owners, 100%. You said your base number would be 150. Do you know how many teams would be below that?
Is that too high, do you think?
It probably is.
No, no.
I think that's about
that's
15.
a lot of teams
I
would
think
be below
that's
it.
average middle of the league, right?
So do you have a guess? How many teams would be below that number?
Oh, I would probably say, I'd say 13
I was
to
gonna say like
15.
12, yeah.
16 teams would be
Okay.
below the 150 million mark.
Yep.
2 teams are at 147, the Mariners and the Rockies. But having a team like the Athletics spend $60 million on a roster can't happen.
Also, keep in mind, I don't mind when teams have a year where they don't spend a whole lot. Like the Reds, when we anticipated them to lose 100 games 2 years ago or 2 seasons ago, whatever. I didn't mind that they didn't go spend money in the offseason.
Right.
Like, if you're not going to win a lot of games, your roster is going to be super young. I get it. I think there should be a floor, as you talked about, also giving teams a little wiggle room.
Yeah,
Like, my biggest knock on the Guardians, because someone brought this up too, that how come I didn't bash the Tigers when the Guardians and Tigers were going head-to-head, because they were also bottom of the league in spending. The Tigers had never gone more than 3 straight years being in the bottom 5 in spending, and the Guardians for 5 straight years have. And that was my biggest knock on the Guardians, is because that's a half decade of you not even trying. So I do think there could be wiggle room there where, hey, there's a floor, but also at the same time, there's going to be seasons where there's no need to spend $150 million on a roster that is not that is not in a spot to contend. I think maybe you should never go more than 2 years straight without being at least at that floor in some capacity. But that we're splitting hairs at that point. But it's the teams that consistently just don't try to spend money that I'm like, is this just like a business venture for you, or do you have a passion? Because if you can get every owner to have a passion for their team, then that passion bleeds into the sport and then, of course, grows fan bases across Major League Baseball. But we could talk about how many teams are in Major League Baseball, but how many fan bases actually give a damn, that's how you grow baseball, is get more fan bases to give a damn when it's all said and done. So, nonetheless, it's weird all of us agreeing.
Yeah.
So often, especially after
That's
yesterday.
fun.
It's a good start.
Especially
Look at
after
that.
yesterday's show.
No yelling?
When we come back, is Andrew Berry a good general manager? We'll discuss. No. But last thing here, Rob Manfred was asked on the Dan Patrick Show. We're going to give it a go with this clip. Hopefully it plays. That's not on Casey, by the way.
Well,
hold on. No, it's not on Casey.
Let's blame Casey.
It's not on Casey.
Let's
I got your
blame
back, Casey. Rob Manfred was asked about, from Dan Patrick, are there any other potential changes coming to Major League Baseball? And one of the things that was brought up was the automatic balls and strike system. Here's what Rob Manfred had to say on when we can expect to see that be implemented at the Major League Baseball level.
Next 4 years, will we have automated strike zone?
I think you will see some version of the automated strike zone in the big leagues in the next 4 years. Look, the technology piece of it is so robust, Dan. I mean, literally, the path of the pitch is tracked good to 1/100th of an inch, and it's just hard to ignore that kind of technology when it's available.
I mean, I don't think we've ever discussed this, too. I don't know where you guys sit with an automatic balls and strike system. I think 10 years ago, this debate probably gets a little louder just because it just seems so, not unheard of, but just like, oh, no, there's no way to be implemented.
I would even say unheard of.
Yeah, at that
far-fetched.
time. And here we are, and I don't think it's that crazy. I don't want to eliminate the human aspect of umpires and officials through a game, of course, but at the same time, if this is a way to improve the game and improve the percentage of strikes called and to eliminate as many errors as possible, I don't know why you wouldn't go this route. But again, this is one of those touchy subjects for old school baseball fans, because leave the game alone. I've actually 10 years ago probably would have had a problem with this, but Rob Manfred, again, we just talked about it. He's earned my trust to make changes, because I have jumped on every one of his changes and said they're all dumb, every single one of them. The only one I liked was the every team playing every team. I thought that was the best rule change he's made out of all of them. Universal DH, controversial one. Did like that one though. But this kind of fits that universal DH change that so many fans were like, absolutely not, leave it alone, do not do that. but it sounds like within the next 4 years, maybe even less, that this will just be the norm in Major League Baseball.
I toe the line and flip-flop on the human element in sports a lot.
Yeah.
So if you ask me my opinion on a lot of different human element removing it takes, it will change. When it comes to ABS, I am anti the fully automatic strike zone. They just tell the ump what it is and he calls it. I don't like that. I love the AAA challenge method that they had.
Yep.
Tap the helmet, instantaneous review on the Jumbotron, switch them, get them out, or make a strike a ball. I think that's a perfect system. Something we've seen in the Arizona Fall League start this year is reviewing checked swings.
Yeah.
They've been able to tap their helmet and review checked swings. Obviously, that's a lot longer, further away than automatic balls and strikes. I believe he said it was the next 3 years is what they were shooting for. So that's pretty quick to turn around. But it seems like it's been working very well in the minor leagues for some time now. I mean, I've only been to a handful of minor league games to see it in person, but it looks quick. It's seamless. It happens instantaneously. I think they've done what they've needed to do to get it at a point where you can put it in the majors. And with how prevalent the umpire grading and baseball savant and all that stuff is, where you can see right away whether it's a ball or a strike, I think you have to have it because fans watching the game can tell right away before the next pitch whether the call was right or not. And that just puts the umpire at so much risk for, being harassed and all that stuff. If you have the technology to get calls right in this instance.
Baseball is one of the only sports that has rules that fluctuate by the day.
Yeah.
you go to Boston, you got a 400-foot wall that's only 250 feet to left. You know what I mean? You go to Great American Ballpark, it's 404 to center. You go to Houston, it's 425 to center. You go to Detroit, it's 385 to right. You go to Yankee Stadium, it's 320 to right. You go all over the place, and then you also have the part of it where umpires get to determine their strike zone. A strike zone can fluctuate given the guy. You have a bigger strike zone, a smaller strike zone. All those things fluctuate, and it's strange to have things like that. I think this, to make it a more uniform rule, I think that helps the sport. I don't think it's that big of a deal if you do it the other way, if you do it
just the earpiece,
striker ball, and you're just the mouthpiece, because you still will have the umpires at first base, at second base, and at third base. The umpires don't change. You still have them there. They still have to make the calls, and then if you want to challenge, you still have the ability to challenge. But Jacob is right. The way that they're doing it in the minor leagues, and these challenges last 1 second. You don't even know they challenge.
It's so
it.
fast.
So if you're able to do that, then yeah, I think you need to cap the number of challenges you get, but I don't know what the rule is down there.
I'm not sure either.
But if you have a cap on it and you say we can't
challenge every pitch.
Correct.
Yeah.
We can't be out here challenging every single pitch, but if each batter maybe gets a challenge a game, if you get it right, it carries over. Stuff like that. I think that's the way to go, and I think it would help the sport. Hopefully it's before 4 years. But yeah, I think it's the right move.
I know you're a big tennis guy. And I think that's the closest thing to this is the removal of line judges in major tennis to fully automatic on whether the ball's in or out. What is your stance on that one? Do you miss the line judges ever? Do you like the rule change? Do you think? I mean, it obviously gets more calls right than they did in the past, which helps the integrity of the sport.
I miss the line judges for the same reason I'd miss umpires, just because when you think of tennis, you think of the line judges. When you think of baseball, you think of the umpires. I think there's just that part of it that was always there, but it's unequivocally the right call. You're asking people to make calls that they don't have a 100% probability of them getting right.
Sometimes they don't even have a good angle to see.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's you have to do it. You have to try to be as correct, as accurate as you can, and this is the way to do that. But I will say, whenever they go back to the French Open, and it's still the clay, right?
Yeah.
So the umpire will go out and check the clay, just the ball mark out there. I think that's funny. I think that's cool.
You might have a good point about the different field dimensions in baseball. It is wild that there's not a universal.
There's
field
not a universal
dimension.
home run.
Like imagine if imagine in the NBA. So like the 3-point distance, like at the top of the key is 23 feet, the corners is 22. But you go to the Staples or Crypto Arena, whatever it is now. Hey, when you go to Los Angeles, it's going to be 19 feet from the corners and 20 feet from the top of the key.
How
But
sick would the Warriors have been during their run if
yeah.
they just bumped
Oh, yeah.
their 3-point line and Oracle back like 5 feet?
Oh, my God.
Steph and Clay can hit them, no one else. You win every game by 30.
Or if
That'd be insane.
like the length of the court is 94 feet, but you go to Boston and it's going to be 80 feet, and like those different advantages. I just find that wild that in baseball, that's just the norm. But you can't go around to every single ballpark, demolish them all, and put them all up universally. But you could have a standard set that every new ballpark that does go up, it has to be these dimensions. But again, I'm fine with it the way it is, to be honest, I guess. But it is kind of a wild concept. No other sport has that, where every playing field that you go to is different than the playing field that you either play at home or the night before on the road.
It's just strange. It's strange.
All right, this is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wingham and Dayton. All right, this next topic that we're going to dive into is for fans of loser teams. When we can't talk about our team in the World Series, we get to talk about our regular season awards that are handed out by the team itself.
That's right.
We'll get to that next. The Cincinnati Reds Team Awards was announced yesterday.
I love baseball offseason in October.
Controversial stuff in Cincinnati that we'll get to when we come back. More Off the Bench next. Yesterday, the Cincinnati Reds and the local chapter of the Baseball Writers Association of America announced their 2024 award winners. And as the email says, congratulations to the award winners for 2024, your Cincinnati Reds, of course. No, I found some of these kind of funny. So again, the team awards for 2024, the Reds season. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the excitement for next season. Terry Francona, now the manager, it's kind of died down a little bit. It's been a little quiet. We heard a lot about the managers or the assistant coaches that were let go. Don't really know what his coaching staff's going to look like. That's going to be the next thing we'll keep an eye on, of course. And then free agency, winter meetings coming up. We'll get to all of that stuff. We'll be keeping an eye on all of that once this boring what's this tournament that the Yankees and Dodgers are playing in? What is
Who
that?
knows?
I forgot. I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, the Reds at least get a vacation earlier. I mean, these losers just want to keep working.
Our players are just good fathers, good husbands, good family men. They don't want to be playing this children's game in October when they could be home with their own families. It's a round of applause.
It's just
to the Reds.
It's just a hunk of metal.
That's right. It's just a piece of metal.
Oh man, but no, the Cincinnati Reds Team Awards. No surprise here. No doubt about this one. The Ernie Lombardi Team MVP, Mr. Ellie De La Cruz. Congratulations, Ellie De La Cruz.
That's the right call.
Felt like there were two obvious answers on this awards list, so let's hear the next one.
So how about this one? Well, we'll go with the Joe Nuxall Good Guy Award.
Well, this was a layup.
This was a layup.
This was the most obvious ironclad block and key of the year. I mean, he was giving out lineup cards half the year.
He was giving speeches. He was out there motivating the team in a way that David Bell never did.
To the point to where he almost became a player manager.
He almost became the first player manager since Pete Rose.
So we're really just throwing almost out there.
I mean, almost. But he did not almost win this award. Ladies and gentlemen, the Joe Nuxall Good Guy Award, Mr. Luke Maley.
That's big time. That's big time because that's the only award he'll win. So kudos to him.
Good guy.
Guy of the year.
I feel
Luke
bad.
Maley, I'm fine saying this. I feel comfortable saying this. Better guy than baseball player.
Yes.
Never mind. We're not.
Yep.
It's nice having that conversation as opposed to the other one that we've been having in football.
Right.
What's the other one?
For quite some time. A better person than football player, and he's not a good person.
Luke Maley, and this isn't a he's a bad baseball player conversation. He's a really good person.
Very good person.
He's not the best baseball player.
Very good person, though.
Very
but
good
he is
person.
the best person.
Great person. Joe Nuxall Man of the Year.
Is it going to be awkward, when him and Terry Francona come face to face and Luke's like, you took my job, dude.
Who's the better guy?
Yeah, who's the better guy? But, who's the better manager? We'll never know. Terry Francona came in and, I hope he doesn't cut Luke Maley. I hope that they find a way to make that work because not only did Terry Francona come in and take his job, he could cut him from the team on top of that. Dirty stuff. Terry Francona, dirty stuff. And then the Johnny Vandermeer, Pitcher of the Year. I thought this one was interesting.
Easy answer, right?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Easy answer.
Nick
All-star.
Martinez.
Oh.
What? No? Nick Martinez was named the Johnny Vandermeer Pitcher of the Year.
Great year for Nick Martinez.
Yeah.
Really good reliever and also starter. What are we doing, Elliot?
The only thing I can think of is that he was healthy when the rest of the guys went down, and they needed him to step up, and he did. And this is not a bash Nick Martinez segment
No,
for
it's
what
not.
it's worth.
Not at all.
But to say that Hunter Green wasn't the best pitcher on the staff this season would be a false statement. I think it's crazy. But if that's what the team decides, that's what they decide. Nick Martinez, Pitcher of the Year award.
He was an all-star, and in 14 starts, he had an ERA below 3, a 2.75 ERA in 14 starts this year. Just an incredible year for Hunter Green, a 6.3 WAR, best year of his career, no doubt about it. Put to bed any of the ace conversations. We had plenty of those at the beginning of the season, and those are certainly all gone by the wayside as we head into 2025. He's certainly the ace on this team, and not the pitcher of the year, Nick Martinez. And
Mark Fetter's asked, should terrible teams give out awards?
And that's a valid question. That's a valid question. But I thought there were two people on this team that were worthy of getting awards, and I thought it was Ellie De La Cruz and Hunter Green.
And one of them didn't.
And one of them didn't get an award.
One of them didn't get an award.
I feel bad for Hunter Green because keep in mind, 2024 started with his team kicking him in the man parts by not allowing him to be the opening day starter, and the 2024 season ends with getting kicked in the man parts by him not being named Pitcher of the Year. Nick Martinez, ladies and gentlemen. The Johnny Vandermeer, most outstanding.
I hope Nick Martinez is back.
Nick Martinez had a great year, and I do really hope he's back, but that's crazy.
That's insane. It's insanity.
Yeah,
How they were able to do that, or how they were able
come to that conclusion?
Like I said, the only thing I can think of is when everybody went down, Nick Martinez was the one guy that was left fighting for our lives.
That is true, and he played great down the stretch.
Did he miss games this year?
With the Reds, I feel like it's a safe bet that he did.
He appeared in 42 games, 26 as a reliever, 16 as a starter. Obviously, jack of all trades, was able to kind of fill whatever role that they needed out of him. He won the National League Pitcher of the Month in September, pitching in games that don't matter. But nonetheless, he was named the September National League Pitcher of the Month. While the good playoff teams are resting their starters, getting prepared for the big old tournament that they play at the end of the year. What's that called? The playoffs? Losers. But nonetheless, no, Nick Martinez, great season. I do hope the Reds bring him back because
really hope so.
Honestly, it is guys like that in a season where you do have depth and you are competitive.
Maybe that's why they did this.
You're not going to have come on, your pitcher that you got to defend your crown, dude. You got to come back and defend your crown. But
Craig makes a very funny point in the chat. Hunter Green's probably going to get Cy Young votes. And he's not the best pitcher on the Reds. What a staff we have
how many
here,
Johnny Vandermeer votes did he get?
What would you rather have? The Johnny Vandermeer Pitcher of the Year or some guy named Cy?
Yeah, Johnny Vandermeer's.
With a Y.
That's right.
So, nonetheless. All right, this is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wingham and Dayton. You were talking about the Oakland A's a little bit ago. And it's funny because it's not funny. The hurricane that destroyed Tampa's stadium, right?
The Trop.
The Trop, that will not be fixed by the season.
No.
And there's a big debate right now of where the Rays are going to end up playing. We just watched the final Major League Baseball game ever played, at Oakland. But Oakland has a vacant stadium. I do know the MLB wants the Rays to stay in Tampa somehow, some way. They want to stay near Tampa. Nonetheless, with the Trop basically being unusable due to the storm damage. But there is a vacant Major League Baseball stadium that could be used in the meantime. So I don't know what they're going to do, but yes, an unfortunate situation for the Rays at this point.
Would be the most insulting but funny thing I've ever seen. We're going to put the Tampa Bay Rays in Oakland for another year. You get one more year, Oakland fans.
Would they just be Rays fans?
I guess so. You'd have to be. You'd have to be. Otherwise, you have to go to that 4,000-seat stadium in Sacramento.
Remember a few years ago when there were discussions about whether the Rays would split time between Montreal and Tampa?
Yeah.
Could they just play this year in Montreal?
Yeah, they could. I don't know why you wouldn't.
That'd be really cool for Montreal fans. I mean, it would suck for the 5 to 6 Tampa Bay Rays fans that go to those games, but Montreal would be a great atmosphere.
Not enough people are talking about if the Oakland Athletics make the playoffs, what happens then.
I think we're fine.
I think we're fine. But
I think we're all right.
I think we're fine. But I'll say this. Could you imagine a playoff game, a World Series game, and that 4,000-seat stadium? I'm exaggerating. It's 11,000. But you get my point. Could you, what's the solution there?
I think the Reds
go back to Oakland?
Pack that sucker out.
Pack it up to 11K? God, that would be terrible.
11.5, standing room only. I'm sure there's a
terrible.
grass field next door.
I'm sure there is.
There can't be a second level of bleachers. You can see over.
Yeah, you definitely could.
Yeah.
They need the Clippers wall.
They
fan
need the wall.
51
Imagine-
uninterrupted rows.
Imagine if that 11,000 person baseball stadium put a wall of 50 uninterrupted fan rows directly behind home plate.
Outrageous.
4,500 fans.
One row around the whole stadium, and then boom, 4,500 people straight up behind home
Outrageous.
plate. That'd be cool.
Would be cool.
That'd be the coolest stadium in baseball.
Nonetheless. But no, keep in mind, too, so you got the A's who are going to be playing in a 11,000-seat venue. And so Rob Manfred and baseball are talking about they want the Rays to stay as local as possible, looking for options nearby. Imagine if you have two Major League Baseball teams playing in non-MLB venues in one season. Like, they have to be thinking outside the box and can't. I mean, I get why they want to keep them as close to home as possible, and I'm sure the players and the teams wants to do that as well. But that would be wild for 2025 to see two teams playing in non-MLB stadiums for the year. Nonetheless. But okay, Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Some housekeeping items that we'll send over to Elliot here on the YouTube, or to Casey on the YouTube side, and then we'll dive into some college football talk coming up around the corner, as well as some
Do you know
NFL
how many
stuff.
fans Tampa averaged this season, real quick?
It's usually not good, right?
So the Oakland Athletics were dead last. They averaged what their capacity would be at this new stadium, 11,000. Which is terrible. And second last, Miami, 13,000. And third last, Tampa Bay, 16,000 fans.
Wow.
Maybe they should keep it nearby. Find a little smaller venue.
Yeah,
Pack that baby.
Find out just a little high school field and just play there.
You know, from a percentage standpoint, they'd lead Major League Baseball in attendance. There you go. All right, we'll step away for a few moments. Casey, housekeeping items. We send it to you on YouTube, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, and then, of course, we'll dive into some college football talk as we close out the show here today. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.
No, I don't know, Casey.
Yeah. The Bengals Report, proudly sponsored by Encore Technologies. At Encore, we deliver cutting-edge IT solutions for a data-driven world of mobile computing and desktop support, advanced data center solutions. We help businesses enhance efficiency and
Productivity!
visit encore.tech, where your path to innovation begins. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like button. Share this show with a friend. That helps us grow, helps us bring in more viewers like you. Thank you. Throwing it over to you, Elliot.
Bengals show tonight with Jacob and Craig.
That's right.
At 7 o'clock?
7 p.m.
So tune in there. Other than that, I don't know what we got.
I think that's it.
Bengal show? Just Bengal show? Is that what it's called? Bengal show?
Yeah. Well, I guess that's what we're rocking with today.
Chatterbox Bengals.
Chatterbox Bengals.
Elliot's
I like
Mr. Housekeeping. He keeps the house.
Kind of. Not really. Like, subscribe.
Of course.
Anything
Become
else?
a member.
I think that's it. We really don't have anything left.
No, not really. Tonight, 7 p. Come check it out. We'll talk Bengals.
Bengal show.
Big game this weekend.
They play the Eagles.
They do. Whiteout.
Win or go home.
Joe Burrow doesn't give a damn about the whiteout.
I like that quote.
I do too. It's a good quote.
I love that
It's a good
quote.
quote.
I'll play in this if I have to.
That's
he
right.
says.
Wearing a Bengals jersey. It's like, that's not that big of a reach.
Yeah.
You do play in those.
It's awesome to have. It's awesome to have a cool quarterback.
Well, they do now, so we can't use that bit anymore. They have the coolest. They have a quarterback way cooler than Burrow.
I don't know about that.
You don't think? I think Jameis Winston is the coolest quarterback in the world.
No, I like Jameis, but
Oh,
I wouldn't
he's a
say he's the
legend.
coolest quarterback in the
He
world.
stole crab legs with $1 million NIL deal.
Yeah, but
Big league.
it was
He's
before
the
NIL.
dorkiest quarterback in the world.
I love Jameis. Joe Burrow would never throw for 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in the same season. Ever.
No.
Jameis did.
All right, back to radio.
ESPN's 30 for 30. There
That's
you go.
right.
All right.
All right, we're good.
Back to Radio Land.
Justin Kenner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett back with you here on a Thursday. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton, and of course Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. A couple outlets like Sports Illustrated and others keep coming out again within the last couple of hours that the Steelers' interest in Cooper Kupp is starting to pick up.
You heard this before?
We have pairing him with Brandon Ayuk and Devontae Adams is going to be a sick wide receiver
Would
trio.
the Steelers have the best receiving room in the entire league with those three together?
Yeah, no, but
Devontae Adams, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp?
yeah, then it would be. No, I still don't think so. I still don't think so.
Okay. All right. Well, they didn't get any of them.
The
And I don't think they're going to get Kupp.
Any of them.
The Steelers remind me of the Dallas Mavericks. I don't know if every
Okay.
year, like the Dallas Mavericks, they're always in.
Yeah.
Kevin Durant's a free agent or available for trade. The Mavericks are in.
LeBron was going there.
LeBron's a 3-time Dallas Maverick snub.
Three-time.
Every big-time free agent that is available or a guy that's available on the trade block. Mark Cuban, although he's no longer full, owner.
But sits on the bench still?
I mean, that's the most powerful minority owner I've ever
respect
seen.
it.
Good for him. But no, like the Mavericks are always in on every big name in the NBA. They never pull the trigger. I know that. I mean, Luka, you drafted, but
Yeah.
Kyrie, you got. Did they get into
Well, I
the
guess they
trade?
technically traded for Luka.
With the
Luka was drafted by the Hawks.
but like a real trade, like at the
Yeah.
deadline, like that type.
Kyrie.
But like that's it. Outside
Yeah.
of that, every big name you could think of, they've whiffed on, and that's kind of the Steelers right now too. And I think it's because I think the Steelers are tired of the idea that, and it's kind of my big pushback on them too. They're just content. They're content with winning 8 to 9 games a year. They're just content, and they're not aggressive. Well, to their credit, they were aggressive in the offseason. Getting Justin Fields and obviously Russell Wilson. I'd say that's pretty aggressive for the Pittsburgh Steelers overall, but their back was against the wall. They kind of had to. They didn't really have a choice, in that regards. But very aggressive. They were in on the Brandon Ayuk conversation. Devontae Adams was almost a Steeler last week. And now the big name that is circulating around the trade mill, if you will, is Pittsburgh and Cooper Kupp. Could they potentially pull it off? Possibly. Would George Pickens and Cooper Kupp be a hell of a wide receiver duo? When you look at the wide receiver duo, that's Jamar and T in the AFC North. I wouldn't pick Pickens and Cooper Kupp over them, but that would be a good counter to those two, no doubt about it. And the one thing that the Steelers would have is a defense to complement that offense, and they already do have a very good defense, and the offense looked okay the other night. I'm not buying this now. I don't think we've seen the Bills strike early and get a deal done. While we watched the Chiefs yesterday, get a deal done with Hopkins. We're watching a lot of teams get deals done early. The Steelers won't get it done early, but I do think that if they play as well this weekend as what they did last, I do believe that urgency is going to increase even more because they're going to buy in 100%. I believe. Who do the Steelers have this week, by the way?
It's primetime.
Another primetime
Jets?
game. No, they just played the Jets.
They just played the Jets.
Oh, man. Good
I'm
stuff,
looking it up.
Jacob.
That was
good
poor.
stuff. All of us don't know.
Commanders.
And that's fine. The Commanders.
No. Giants.
this
Giants.
This is
Giants.
great. This is great.
Giants.
That was
be fair.
the best minute of radio of all
You
time.
Sorry,
said
I don't
Jets.
know the Steelers' schedule.
You said Jets.
It is primetime, though, so I had that.
Yeah. So you said Jets. They just played. He
Right.
said Commanders. They play next week.
Right.
But they have
So we
the
were right
Giants.
around it.
It was.
Yeah.
We, got it
We
right.
were fighting a two-front war there.
Credit
we
to
were
us.
in front, you were behind.
Credit to us.
Yeah, we got it.
So November 5th is the trade deadline, and I believe the Steelers have a bye week after this matchup with the Giants because they don't play again until the 10th when they play the Commanders. So
Good math.
I do believe.
Did that in your head, I know.
Did I do that correctly? I think I did because it looked kind of like a wide gap between dates. Yeah.
No, that's big time.
Yeah,
That should be an Olympic sport. Looking at NFL schedules listed in a row and
Yeah.
picking out where the bye week is.
Yeah.
Because I can't do that math.
Well,
You got to find a 10-day instead of a 7. That's brutal.
I
Kenner,
was
who
top
do the-
68
Kenner-
in my class.
There
so
you go.
Kenner, who do the Colts play this week?
I don't know.
We're just going to go down the league.
Yeah, well, I was just going to keep asking to make him feel
Just-
bad.
But no, so they got the Giants coming up this week. The problem for Pittsburgh is that could be a little bit fool's gold. Like you could dominate the Giants, and it's the Giants. I think you'd rather have the Commanders this week because if the Steelers take care of business against the Commanders and you beat a contender, then you feel like, all right, we got something here. Let's go get Cooper Kupp and put us over the top. You know what I mean? It could be fool's gold if you go and beat the Giants. You should beat the Giants. If you're the Steelers with that defense, and now, if Russell Wilson and Pickens have a nice little connection, you should beat the Giants. But if they lose to the Giants, I don't think they're getting Cooper Kupp. But if they beat the Giants and get their third straight win and get their 6th win of the season and get to 6-2, I do anticipate them making a move, especially with that gauntlet of a schedule that they have coming up. Now, the Browns have made that a softer back half of the schedule. But again, you got 2 with the Bengals. You still have the Eagles. You got 2 with the Ravens. Yeah, I think that they can't just go in as is. if they like what they see from Russell Wilson, I think they need to go pull the trigger on that Cooper Kupp deal, assuming no one else swoops in and takes him.
The only reason that I don't think they're going to is because we saw that they were the heavy distant favorites for Brandon Ayuk, and then they were the heavy distant favorites for Devontae Adams, and now they're minus 125 to trade for Cooper Kupp, according to Vegas, distant favorites over the Chargers at 4-1. I mean, that gap is monstrous for a team that doesn't usually do moves like this.
Yeah.
So I would be surprised if Cooper Kupp ended up on the Steelers. It was reported that the Chiefs were close to a Cooper Kupp deal before they pulled the trigger on DeAndre Hopkins, but they didn't want to move top-end draft capital for the aging wide receiver. I wonder if the Steelers would be willing to do the same. Trading a second-round pick or high draft capital like that for Cooper Kupp seems like a win-now move. And personally, I don't think the Steelers roster is Super Bowl caliber right now, but maybe they think it is, and Cooper Kupp pushes them over that edge. But I don't know. I haven't necessarily seen what I would want to see from either of these quarterbacks to make an all-in move on a one-year deal from both of them.
Yeah, people make a lot about the Browns with Myles Garrett. I mean, you're wasting his prime window. Well, the Steelers would be wasting J.J. Watts as well. Or T.J. Watt, sorry. They would be wasting T.J. Watt's prime as well if they just continue just to stick with average. And that's why I could see them making this move. I think if they do make this move, this is an example of the front office telling you, we feel like our Super Bowl window's closing. And I don't think their window's been open. But I think that they know they have the defense to win a Super Bowl, and I think that they realize, man, we need to strike and make moves. They're not paying their quarterbacks anything.
Right.
So if the Chiefs, you're right, that deal fell through because they wanted not only a high draft pick to get Cooper Kupp to Kansas City, but the Rams wanted whoever they trade with to take on the majority of that contract still. And that's where the Chiefs just didn't have the cap space to be able to pull that off. Pittsburgh does. Pittsburgh, if they are willing to pay some of that contract for Cooper Kupp and give up a top draft pick, you better be damn sure that you could win it, though.
Yeah.
Because you've basically told everyone Justin Fields is not your guy. You don't believe he can get you there. Don't confuse good with or great with good.
Yeah.
And so they're telling you that. So if Russell Wilson's not the guy and you go back to Justin Fields, keep in mind, George Pickens, he was becoming a very disgruntled employee in Pittsburgh. And then you have all of a sudden a quarterback that's throwing the football and getting him the football. Look how good teammate he was. Look how happy Mr. George Pickens was, a Steeler guy. He's a leader out there, right? Because he's only happy when he's getting the ball and he's not a distraction at that point. I think that it would be a huge gamble for Pittsburgh, but it's all on how they view their situation, and I think that situation is Russell Wilson, and we'll find out.
One thing that's a lot – sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if they keep winning games, you have to believe in your team at some point, despite what you think the roster would be. I agree with Jacob. I don't think it's a Super Bowl roster. I don't think one Cooper Kupp makes the Steelers a bona fide contender, but I do think the same way I think if the Bengals were to keep losing – we knew who they were, right? You can't just call yourself a good team, a good offense, and then consistently not win games. It doesn't work like that. The Steelers, I can sit here and yell at them the same way I yell at the Brewers. I don't think the Brewers are ever going to win a World Series, but all the Milwaukee Brewers do is win games. The Steelers, as of right now, are that team. All they do is win. All they do is win football games. And if I was the front office there, if I was Mike Tomlin, I'd look at the deficiencies. I'd probably look for some sort of new running back if that was available. And if there's not that available, what's the next thing we can do to help the offense? Because they know what they have in their defense, an elite caliber wide receiver to boost that room. And it certainly would be a good wide receiver room with Cooper Kupp, obviously. But I'm just saying, at some point, you are who you are. If you keep winning games, I can't. There's no rebuttal. I think the wheels will fall off eventually in the back half of the season after Thanksgiving. But as of right now, yeah, they're fine.
My thing, I guess, is just, and I agree with all the sentiment you have there, but if I'm going to add a wide receiver to a room of a team that I think is on the brink of being a contender maybe, I'm not going to give a second-round pick for Cooper Kupp. I'm going to get someone with less draft capital than that, just because I don't want to give up that much.
Yeah.
Because the one thing about Cooper Kupp's deal, too, that's a little bit unique compared to Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins that have already been traded this cycle is there's an out after this year, but there is 2 more years on that contract. So you could be getting 3 years out of Cooper Kupp after making this trade. So it's not necessarily just a 1 year and go like this DeAndre Hopkins and Amari Cooper seem to be. This could be a long-term move, which is why I'm even more anti it for the Steelers, because this offseason, you're going to have a 32-year-old Cooper Kupp with back-to-back $30 million cap hits if you trade for him, and then you're going to go try to find your quarterback of the future? I think that timeline is reversed for me. I think if I'm a team trading for Cooper Kupp, I want to have my quarterback in place now because you have year 32 and year 33 of a really good wide receiver to try to make a run at a Super Bowl.
Yeah, like the Bengals.
James Rapine.
There's 3 teams that I think make a lot of sense for Cooper Kupp right now. One, and again, they may want to get Cooper Kupp out of the NFC altogether, but Washington, I think, is an easy one to throw out there. You pair him with Terry McLaurin. But they have the cap space to do it and the draft capital. And I think Pittsburgh's one. I think Pittsburgh makes sense. I get why people are saying that, but I agree with Jacob. If they weren't aggressively in on Brandon Ayuk, if they weren't aggressively in on Devontae Adams, if they're not always aggressively in all these moves, but they never come through and follow through with them, at some point you start to lose faith that they're going to get it done. So that has me a little skeptical there. You want to know the team I think that needs to go all out and do it and pull the trigger? It's the Los Angeles Chargers.
Do you have the chat pulled up?
No.
I just said that, right? When you took it back.
I'm sorry, my bad.
No, I love that we're on the same page.
Yeah,
Because I literally read as soon as you took it back, I said I would love to see Cooper in
I'll let
Chargers
you go
uniform.
take over for them with the
No,
Chargers.
go for it.
But no, I just like we
They
talked.
have They have one of the worst
It
wide
would be
receiving rooms in football.
perfect.
They have one of the worst wide receiving rooms.
And the
rooms in
AFC is
football.
not very good right now.
No.
Like I think as of right now, we've talked about it, but the Bills out of the East, Ravens out of the North, the Texans out of the South, and of course the Chiefs out of the West. Outside of that, 3 spots: Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and who? Like, I don't look at anyone else right now and say, oh, that's a lock. Jacksonville, no. The Colts, Jacksonville, and Tennessee, that whole division's out outside of Houston. Cleveland's out. They're done. I think that the Jets, I think a week ago I would have put them in that conversation, but there's a lot going on behind closed doors. And Miami, maybe, but even if they get Tua back, it's not about Tua being on the field. We know who Tua is on the field in the back half of the season to begin with. I think the Chargers, with that defense and with Justin Herbert, who's putting up sick numbers with no one to throw the ball to, imagine what they could do with Cooper Kupp over in Los Angeles. And again, he's already over that way anyways. I mean, he wouldn't even have to relocate all that much.
I think it would be a perfect move. That's exactly where I want him. And it would be bad for the Bengals because that just makes another scary contender in the AFC because I think the Chargers take a massive step with an addition of Cooper Kupp. And then another point, not only just Justin Herbert, who he would help really unleash a little bit. Colin Will in our chat puts in another great point. Cooper Kupp would be a perfect mentor for Ladd McConkey.
Yeah.
The same, very similar position, underslide slot receivers who rely on great route running. Would be a great way to mold him more into the offense and free up Quentin Johnson. You're asking him to do a lot as a second-year player there. So it would be a really good move for the Chargers, and I think something that's exactly where I would want him to go is a place like that with a quarterback lacking weapons because he's so reliable when he is on the field. I know there's injury concerns, and obviously there are, and maybe a little bit more than you would like with a 30-year-old wide receiver. But when he is playing, there's not many guys in the league that are more reliable than he is.
You mentioned James Rapine a little bit ago.
Yeah.
The Bengals, I didn't look at them as a legitimate landing spot. For him, you think the Bengals, you think T and Jamar. I mean, what the hell do they need Cooper Kupp for? But why not? Like, I always say, like, what moves can you make at the deadline to improve your defense? Not many. So you could just take what your strength is already and just lean into it even more. I don't know. I didn't follow the full article. What were some of the explanations for why the Bengals should kick the tires on a Cooper Kupp trade?
The Bengals have a need at wide receiver 3. We touched on it yesterday.
Yep.
The reception split since the first 3 weeks between Jamar and T. Higgins has been astronomical. Just 4 catches for Mike Gesicki since those first 3 weeks. Similar numbers for Yoshivas, really falling off the face of the earth. So attacking a wide receiver 3 is something that I don't think the Bengals should turn their nose up at in free agency, obviously. Or not in free agency, at the trade deadline, pardon me. But obviously Cooper Kupp's a little bit of a reach. That's
For number 3, that's
a
pretty
lot
wild.
of draft capital. But the thought process, I believe, is that, like I said, with his contract, you have him for 2 more years. So he's the wide receiver 3 this year in an all-in year, and then he is the T. Higgins replacement next year and for 2 years as you try to roll the dice again on an Andre Yoshivas or a Jermaine Burton and try to strike gold and find a true wide receiver 2. This would give you about 2 more years of runway in doing so if Kupp can stay healthy and play for the Bengals. So that's the rationale there. Would only be a wide receiver 3 for about 10 weeks. But certainly an interesting trade, one that I don't think is likely whatsoever, but would be fun to watch.
It would be. Why not make the Bengals have the best offense in football? The greatest show on turf. Why not?
Yeah, but I love that. Hey, we need a wide receiver number 3. Let's go get Cooper Kupp.
That's the best.
I'll take it.
I feel like a Yankees
No, I'm not
fan.
mocking it. Yeah.
If you gave me the option to have Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins on the same roster with Joe Burrow, oh boy.
Here's why I do not think that will work, and I'll tell you why.
I don't think it will happen.
I'll tell you why when we come back.
That's a good
How
tease.
about
That
that?
was a good
How about
tease.
that? Oh, Kinner being negative. I'm really not being negative, but there's a talking point to that I don't think is being thought about when it comes to Cooper Kupp being the replacement for T. Higgins. We'll discuss that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. So and welcome back, by the way, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Brief Browns talking point here.
Please.
Coming into the season, Amari Cooper wanted a contract extension. He'd been one of the most efficient wide receivers in football, led the AFC North in receiving yards the last couple of years. Obviously, the first Browns receiver since the Browns returned to Cleveland in '99, first Browns receiver to have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Obviously, been a great piece for the Browns over the last couple of years. They end up not getting an extension done, a long-term extension, but I did think it makes sense just to rework the contract, give him more guaranteed money. Cool. Both sides were happy and content. He still was upset, wanted that long-term deal, but whatever. Both sides moved on. The second that deal gets done, then all of a sudden the Browns are in on Brandon Ayuk. And the money that Brandon Ayuk went for and was asking for was the same amount of money that Amari Cooper was asking for. And then Amari Cooper went from being content in Cleveland to now very disgruntled because, hold on, wait a minute. You told me you didn't have, because one of the reasons was it wasn't that the Browns used his age as an example or as a reason, which, by the way, that should have been the reason. I supported the Browns not wanting to give an extension to Amari Cooper, who was 31 years old. I don't know why that should not have been the number one talking point with that from that front office. They said they couldn't afford it. Multiple reporters have come out and said Browns had said they couldn't afford to give Amari Cooper that extension. But then all of a sudden, they're in on Brandon Ayuk for the same amount of money, if not a little bit more than what Amari Cooper was asking for. That's what led to the disgruntlement of Amari Cooper from that point on. It wasn't that he didn't get the extension. It's the fact that they told him they didn't have the money to do it. And then not even a week later, the Browns are in the heat of the conversation in the rumor mill of potentially landing Brandon Ayuk. So earlier you mentioned James Rapine's article regarding Cooper Kupp potentially going to Cincinnati. Yes, it's a pipe dream a little bit, and it would be something very unique to see if they did pull off the Cooper Kupp deal, as you mentioned, an option for potentially 2 more years. It's a long-term solution at wide receiver, a short long-term solution at wide receiver, if you will, as a replacement for T. Higgins. The problem with that is if I'm T. Higgins, now I'm pissed because the money you said that you didn't have for me, now all of a sudden you magically have it for Cooper Kupp. Well, would you be concerned about that?
The Rams would be eating money. The Rams would be eating some money in any deal where Cooper Kupp gets moved. So it would be below a $25 million cap hit every year. So it would be below the T. Higgins money.
Fair.
It was reported that with a second-round pick, the Rams would eat upwards of $15 million, maybe nearing 20 for a second-round pick. If you go below that, they'll certainly eat less. There's no system for it. It all comes down to negotiations. But I would imagine if the Bengals traded for him, they would be willing to eat more of the contract for less draft capital just because of how they've operated in the past, holding on to day 3 picks like they're gold.
Yep.
So I wouldn't expect them to move a second-round pick for a 31-year-old wide receiver at a position that's really not a position of need. It's a luxury trade, which I don't know that the Bengals should be making luxury trades right now. I think there's a lot of holes on this team, and we can talk about how Cooper Kupp can fill into wide receiver 2 next year with T. Higgins gone, and all that stuff's great, but then you don't have a second-round pick. And there's a lot of holes on this defense. Yeah. And I know wide receiver is going to be a big one, so you could say, well, you're taking Cooper Kupp at the second-round pick, and then that's fine and great and whatever. But I think this team should value picks a lot right now. And I know the draft hasn't been great in the last few years. This year's draft looks like it's been one of the best, which is going to save this window a little bit. But because when you pay players as much as we're paying players, you have to hit in the draft. And they didn't for a few years. And this year it seems like they had. So hopefully that if they make a move, they still value those high draft picks and don't trade too many in a package just because I think there's a lot of holes on this defense and we need players to fill them. It's not a one-guy fix.
But if we lose T. Higgins this offseason, you would need to draft a wide receiver.
Right.
What round would you draft a wide receiver?
I would probably draft a wide receiver in the first round if T. Higgins walks. But I would rather have a first-round wide receiver than 31-year-old Cooper Kupp in the second round.
Really?
In terms of trade-off.
What was that?
Speak
Casey,
up.
no,
What the
Casey,
hell was that?
please. I'm
What
only
the hell
laughing
was that?
because Casey had had enough. He was like,
Speak up. Casey just made a grunt over
I hope
there
radio
on the
picked
side.
up on the grunt
I do
because
too.
that was
No,
epic.
I had my mic muted, but I don't know if I would agree with that because of how I think you take the risk on how good Cooper Kupp could be for just two or 3 years. I know that thinking about what you got for T. Higgins, he was the 33rd pick in the draft, and he's missed 4 games pretty much his entire career, every single season that he's played. And Cooper Kupp had a season where he almost broke, 2,000 yards, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I like the second round pick and offloading a bunch of money for the Bengals for the third receiver. I think he comes in and he's immediately better than T. Higgins, to be honest with you, because
I absolutely think Cooper Kupp's better than T. Higgins.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer if that was an option, but the Bengals don't operate like that. So
Call me crazy. I think Cooper Kupp's better than T. Higgins. Don't want him as the receiver next to Jamar. I don't think that's the body type that works in this two-receiver set. T. Higgins is such a good complement to Jamar because he's a different receiver.
I mean, he's 6'2". It's not like
Right, T. Higgins is 6'4". I would like a big body receiver next to Jamar, not a slot guy, personally, as the elite wide receiver, too.
I don't know.
And then you play the mix and match game in the slot. Personally, that's the way I would lean to build this wide receiver room up around Jamar.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, either way.
My worry with Kupp as well is the injuries.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're relying on him to be your wide receiver 2 next year next to Jamar in an offense that we've seen requires 2 elite wide receivers, at 32, how confident are you that he plays 15 games, 14 games?
Yeah. I mean, out of all the positions that the Bengals would use that draft capital on, receiver was probably the one that you feel most comfortable with the team picking with. But as of right now, they're kind of striking out on receivers as of late.
You're right.
Since T. Higgins, it's not been looking great. So,
but none of those were premium picks. None of those were first 2-round picks.
There was one top 100 pick. And
Burton, right?
But yeah, you get my point. I think if I were to have a for sure thing for another couple years, because the window's starting to close up anyways, I would take the for sure thing.
I guess my question then is, how for sure is Cooper Kupp? That's the debate. How for sure of a thing is Cooper Kupp?
Oh, man, I think
he's missed a lot of time. Played 12 games, had 730 yards last year. The year before that, he only played 9 games, had 800 yards. Had almost 2,000 yards the year before, which was phenomenal. But now we're talking about 3 years in a row where he hasn't put together a 1,000-yard season, hasn't even been on the field. That scares me, especially if you're being.
He's due for a whole season.
He is due. If you look at Cooper Kupp's game log, he is due for a 150-catch, 2,000-yard season. So maybe we strike gold.
For the record, I think Cooper Kupp would be worth a second. Like it would be worth, if you're going to draft a wide receiver in the first or second round, I don't think you're going to get a better talent than Cooper Kupp. So I would take Cooper Kupp for 2 years, and you try to go remote. I don't know what all in would be, but you try to get close to whatever that is for these next couple of seasons while you have a healthy Joe Burrow and you have a Super Bowl window available to us.
Yeah, and let me ask you. I mean, we're focused on wide receiver 3 because of this season, but I mean, the question is wide receiver 2 beyond this season. I've seen people totally change their vibe on the chances of Cincinnati keeping T. Like, it's increased because you're seeing coming into this season, there was the hope and anticipation that there'd be enough depth at wide receiver that it wouldn't be convenient to lose T. Higgins, but there'd be enough there to be able to still make that offense flow. We've seen with just Jamar out there, the offense does not look as crisp. In the last 2 weeks, even with both of them out there, they've looked very good, T and Jamar. But the passing game as a whole has not looked very crisp, and it's because of the gap between those two and then that third, pass catching option. So it's created even more question marks at the end of the day. Not that T being good created question marks, it's just how bad everyone else has been in the pass game in that regard. So who knows? But nonetheless, a little bit ago, Russ Heltman with Sports Illustrated put this out covering the Cincinnati Bengals. ESPN not expecting Bengals trade deadline move, names one possible target is the headline. Look, I don't think it's a headline that the Bengals not expected to make a move at the deadline. We discussed it yesterday. It's just not how they operate. But ESPN's Jeremy Fowler doesn't expect Cincinnati to make a move at the trade deadline. But his colleague Ben Solak does think that they could benefit from adding Raiders defensive tackle Adam Butler. Now, if the Bengals were to make a move at the deadline, an Adam Butler move almost seems very Bengals-like. It's not super, super aggressive, addressing a need. It's not very flashy. It's not Amari Cooper to Buffalo. It's not Devontae Adams to the Jets or Hopkins to the Chiefs. But again, it does address a need. It adds another weapon to their pass rush, something that they need at this point.
One thing I think Bengals fans need to realize is you cannot compare the Bengals' needs to the needing a wide receiver or a running back or that stuff. Trading for a big-name wide receiver at the trade deadline is much, much easier. That's why we see 3 or 4 of them moved every single year for mid-round picks. Trading for a tackle or an edge rusher or a corner one, the things the Bengals need, that doesn't happen very often. And if it does, it requires major draft capital. Like, you're not flipping a 3rd or 4th round pick for a corner or an edge rusher that's the same caliber player as Amari Cooper or DeAndre Hopkins. That's just not something that happens in the NFL. So I think that's a lot of things that the Bengals fans need to realize as well as we get closer to the trade deadline and people get a little upset about the Bengals not making moves. The holes that the Bengals have, there's not necessarily moves to be made that will immediately better this team without giving up 1st round or 2nd round picks, which I don't think this team is eager to do.
Yeah.
Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410. Wing AM in Dayton. Again, Adam Butler, 30 years old, 28 tackles this season in 7 games.
The defensive line has been playing much better since they got healthy. So it's
up front.
knocked that need down on my list quite a bit. I would personally, if we're going to focus on a depth piece trade, it would either be tackle or corner, in my opinion, just because the loss of Dax Hill. Mike Hilton's been banged up this year. We saw Geno Stone get hurt, seemingly okay. So we'll see what happens there, but I would look to add in the defensive secondary, and then with the with the Orlando Brown and Mims injuries already on the offensive line, having just Cody Ford as the backup tackle is my main concern. But with the defensive line, we had Lawrence Guy inactive this last weekend against the Browns. I don't necessarily believe that we're going to go out and trade for a guy that's that much better than the D lineman we've had inactive so far. So I'm more leaning towards staying pat on the defensive line when it comes to trade deadline talk.
When was the last? Do we know when the last trade was?
It was Carson Palmer to the Raiders.
Really?
In-season trade.
For the Bengals.
Yeah.
So they don't, it's not that.
No, they don't do it. They don't make in-season trades.
There's not any in-season trades.
Carson Palmer to the Raiders was the last in-season trade for the Bengals.
That was a few years ago.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And Carlos Dunlap, I believe, was released mid-season, and they ended up getting a Joe Mixon release trade situation where he was cut and then traded for. So I think that technically counts as well. But both of those players that completely, trashed the team and said the locker room was terrible and outspoken against ownership. So these aren't moves made to improve the roster or moves made to gain assets. These are moves that they made because they felt like they had to save the culture. They don't make moves in terms of trying to win or sell or anything like that in the end season. It's just not something the Bengals do.
Andy Dalton never trashed the organization, but Andy Dalton was pissed with the way they handled his last year in Cincinnati because he was the starter that last year in Cincinnati before they drafted Joe Burrow, and he knew that was, he knew his time in Cincinnati was coming up. But they also waited till a week. The trade deadline comes, and then the very next week they benched Andy Dalton, and they said, I forgot who was the backup for Andy that year. I forgot who they rolled.
Ryan Finley, right?
Was it Finley? Yeah. So they threw Finley out there as the starter, and Andy Dalton was pissed and came out and said, if I've known you were going to bench me or not have me as the starter for the full season, me and my agent would have gone to you and said, get me out of here at the deadline.
Yeah.
And I remember that was not like major controversy, but that was beef between Andy Dalton, his agent, and the Bengals at that time. AJ Green wasn't, but most players aren't happy. This isn't a Bengals thing. Most players aren't happy if they have to leave a situation that they're comfortable in. But that was, that was a changing of the guard at that time as you were transitioning out of the, that Marvin Lewis era, if you will, a couple years into the Zach Taylor run once you get Joe Burrow and T. Higgins, Jamar Chase and whatnot. Couple names that have been thrown out, not really for the Bengals, but just when you talk about the needs that you would like obviously most likely not going to go get a wide receiver. They're not most likely going to go get anybody.
Right.
But the needs that you talk about, what would you think about even at wide receiver? If you go, I don't think Mike Williams I don't think the Jets will send Mike Williams to Cincinnati. That's a team that they're going to be competing with for that wild card. I don't think the Jets will do that. What about Treylon Burks from the Titans?
I'm good.
I loved him coming in. I'm
okay.
He stinks.
I'm okay without him.
He's been garbage. Yeah, none of those Titans receivers really interest me. I've seen a lot of people pointing to the Tyler Boyd reunion.
I'm good without Tyler Boyd.
He has not been great this year. I think that stinks a lot like the Von Bell reunion stinks, where it's you're relying on old emotions and vibes and not watching tape and seeing how they play. So
I know the offense is bad in Tennessee, but do you know how many catches Treylon Burks has this season? Anybody guess? Any guess?
He's been inactive for I think 3 games.
He's played 3. He's played 3 games. He has 4 catches.
Yeah, he hasn't worked there. They drafted him to be the A.J. Brown replacement, so hasn't been great. He'd be interesting. Maybe Burrow can revive him. He was a special player at Arkansas. He was fun to watch. He was highly touted coming into the drafts. It would be exciting. If that takes a 5th or 6th round pick, I'd jump on Treylon Burks in a second, but I wouldn't go 3rd or 4th for him.
Because, again, that's a true wide receiver 3 hole you're trying to fill or trying to improve. If you don't make a move at the deadline, you're stuck with what you got. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase centric, which isn't a terrible thing, but again,
I would take
so
Treylon Burks.
it's one of those where if you do trade for Treylon Burks and it doesn't work, you at least made an attempt to try to fix a little deficiency in the offense heading into that deadline. Another name that's on here, these names probably won't do anything for Cincinnati, but James Conner, the running back from the Cardinals, and Travis Etienne for the Jaguars. Not so much for the Bengals, but just names to keep an eye out from around the league. But for the Bengals, a name that fits what you talked about, Jacob, Jonathan Jones, cornerback from the Patriots. He is being dangled out there according to reports.
That would be a home run of all home runs. Jonathan Jones is a very, very good corner in New England. If they're tearing it down, that would be a very interesting call that I would certainly make. I mean, with Christian Gonzalez emergence, maybe they don't want to pay 2 corners in a defense with a rebuilding offense. So maybe you can get him for a little cheaper than expected for a player that good. That would be a phenomenal addition to this team. Slide Cam Taylor-Britt from the 1 down to the 2, give him a little less pressure on his shoulders. Maybe he can get back to where he was last year and the year before. That trade made me real excited. Jonathan Jones would be awesome. Uche would be. I just said I don't want to improve our pass rush. I thought we were fine, but man, Uche would be awesome. Didn't he take a pay cut to stay in New England this offseason? I think he took less than he was market value to stay in New England this offseason.
I'm not sure. I can look it up real quick.
Sorry, I dropped that on you. That was mean.
So with Jones, again, potential landing spots of betting favorites, Kansas City Chiefs and Tampa Bay Buccaneers for Jones. A potential landing spot there. And then scrolling down and taking a look at the potential landing spots for, of course, Burks, the Baltimore Ravens are one of those teams.
They're going to get a receiver. I assume that the Ravens will trade for a wide receiver.
Yeah.
And that's one that makes sense for them. But, I mean, they were pretty heavily connected to Devontae Adams for a while, and then that kind of went away. So I would say that I think the Ravens are more likely to move for a receiver than the Steelers are.
And so, the Ravens and the Raiders. Again, the Raiders, I don't know why the Raiders would be buyers at this deadline, but I don't think they know what the Raiders seem like a very confused franchise.
They don't know what's going on.
They don't know what's going on. And I'm not defending the Browns here, but the Browns have a very strong side of the ball that they're trying to decide, do we lean into that, make a couple moves in the offseason and lean into it? But the Raiders don't. They don't have that strong side. I don't know what is their identity. Tom Brady just joining them as an owner, a minority owner. Yeah. I don't know what the Raiders' identity is to where they should be involved in any buying rumors at the deadline coming up. So, there you go. All right, well, that wraps it up for us on the radio side. I will kick the college football conversation to tomorrow's show. So that's we covered a lot today. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, nonetheless. But that does wrap it up for us here today. Thank you for tuning in and hanging out. A lot less yelling today.
That's right.
A lot more.
I like
along.
when we yell. I think it's more fun.
Well, I only laugh.
I agree.
When I go back and rewatch some of those clips,
I watched it yesterday. I was dying laughing
because he sits there and
he
laughs.
Sits there.
He just sits there and laughs. He enjoys it. You thoroughly enjoy it. You do. And a lot of times, and it starts because you get my blood boiling a little bit, and then I take it out on him. And then because when you were just
he'll say something, throw it back to you, and you'll be like, "Oh, that was annoying. I'm going to take it out on Jacob," and then I have to come back.
Yeah. But then we all show up the next day.
My mom asked me when I got home yesterday. She goes, "Do you get along with Kenner?" That seemed real. And I was like, "Well,
Mama Tiss
not that period of time, but we do get along."
Yeah.
Mama Tiss said, "I am sorry for yelling at your boy yesterday." I'll take responsibility for that.
Mrs. Tissett called me woke.
Ooh. She did. She did call you woke.
That had to hurt.
It did. It was very hurttful.
But Mrs. Tissett, I promise I will not yell. Well, no, that's not true.
No, you gotta yell it.
I can't promise.
It's more fun.
I do respect your son, so there's that. But no, thank you everyone for tuning in. This has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Are we?
No, I messed that up.
We're back.
We're back.
My favorite part of today's show, Casey and I had not thrown it to Casey in a while. I apologize about that, but my favorite was he had heard enough. He had heard enough of your Bengals takes because he had to get it.
The was good.
The
was good.
Like it was tennis like. I mean, it was pretty
good.
impressive.
That was the funniest thing ever.
I think people underestimate Cooper Kupp's injuries.
No, I think that's a real thing. But I mean, I'd take the chance. I'd take the chance over Cooper Kupp than a second rounder.
Yeah, I think it's about
I think the risk is bigger on
gamble.
Cooper Kupp than a first rounder.
Maybe on a first rounder, but we wouldn't be giving away a first rounder. So it would be.
Well, I'm saying the alternative to
but-
trading for Cooper Kupp is drafting a receiver in the first round.
How should the draft go in your mind as of right this very second?
Well, I would extend T.
Okay, so if we're extending T, that means we're not drafting a wide receiver.
Not in the first 2 picks.
Okay, so then what are we drafting in the first 2 picks?
I would probably take a corner in the first round or a guard.
Okay. Second
As
round.
of now.
Okay, second round.
The other one.
Okay. All right.
All dependent on how the board falls, obviously. You're not like
And the Bengals probably won't pick a guard in the first round.
I don't know. This year's guard class is incredible.
Well, maybe then.
I think there's going to be like
It's
3,
big.
4 first round guards is what I'm saying, which is crazy.
If that's the case, then maybe. But just historically speaking,
Right,
I don't
right.
think they've ever valued the
Guards in
interior
general
of
don't go in the first round. Like true guards don't go in the first round. I mean, Cooper Beebe, how good was he coming out of Kansas State this year?
He was like a third round.
And he was a third round pick. He was bona fide top guard in the class. So, yeah, I just with Tyler Booker from Alabama, Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, the Tennessee kid, there's like 3 or 4 legit Tate Ratledge from Georgia, like legit first round guards. I love Cordell Wilson, great guy. This O-line would be really cool if we got a really, really good guard in that spot. So
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you at all. I think for me, like I just need the Bengals to focus on defense and keep doing what they've been doing, which is, I mean, like they've already made the mistake of letting go the top talent, so they have to keep going down this path of supplementing it in the draft on defense. So for me, I'm with Jacob. I think they need to re-sign T. Higgins at this point. But if
my
they
argument
weren't,
has always been you can't put that much money in the offense. At this point, who else is worth an extension?
yeah,
Like,
I
where
don't-
else does the money go? So just
Yeah.
extend it.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I agree with that point 100%.
But if you're a T, does your asking price go up?
I think it goes up
because
proportionally
Cincinnati,
with the rest of the.
You need me more than I need you at this point.
Yeah, maybe.
from that circumstance.
Maybe.
It's
it
weird
just
how
depends.
things have volleyed around all. But I did think that when T was out the first couple weeks, I thought that was an opportunity for the offense to really shine in his absence, and it didn't. It's not that it didn't. Jamar didn't, and I keep going back to that. I don't know. That might be something that might just be a coincidence. I don't know if it is though. Jamar's numbers are significantly worse, or they're just not very good when T's not on that field. Like, it's not even like, oh, he drops off by like 10 yards a game. Like, it's almost in half. His yards per game just drop. I mean, he does.
T gets better when Jamar's out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when T's out there with that, it's a weird thing. And I don't know if that's a thing. It happens. I just don't know if it's because Jamar's not out there, T improves and gets better. Because T's not out there, Jamar slumps. I don't know if there's a correlation there, but it sure as hell seems like it because there's been enough games to notice that thing, and you wonder if the front office does too. But sometimes players in front office personnel, they just say, no, that's, Jamar coming back off the missing most of camp and that type of stuff. So who knows?
We have a Chiefs fan in the chat who thinks they just did something by listing the Chiefs' weapons, and it made me laugh out loud, so I'll share it with you. Can't imagine having Hopkins, Mahomes, Travis, Hollywood Brown, Worthy, Rice, Juju, Justin Watson, and Kareem Hunt playing at the same time. None of those names scare me at all, other than Patrick Mahomes.
This isn't 2017.
No, none of those names are elite weapons right now. And Rashee Rice will not be out there. Neither will Pacheco.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a big fan of the Hopkins move. I think it makes the Chiefs much scarier, but I don't think he's not DeAndre Hopkins of 2017. I think
It's going to matter, but it's not a franchise defining.
I think it matters more for Xavier Worthy than it does for DeAndre Hopkins.
Maybe.
You'll free him up a little bit, get more
They
creative.
both have these same stats.
Yeah.
Like they're identical, like from the targets to the catches to the yards, to the window to the like that.
Did you see DeAndre Hopkins' last game in Tennessee? He ran, I think it was 10 routes on like 12 plays on the field, 1 target, 1 catch, fumble. They just didn't throw him the ball.
I thought that was a weird move for him, anyways.
Yeah.
When he went there, just
Well, do you remember that offseason when he said, all I want is a locked-in quarterback situation in a place I can win right away? I'm going to Ryan Tannehill and the Titans.
That money must have been good.
That's right.
Tennessee. Hey, I also see. So Kirby said he was behind on the show. So
Yeah.
what he's referring to is back when we were talking baseball a little bit ago. I have been adamant forever that salary cap, salary cap, salary cap. That's not a hot take. A lot of people share that take. But to prove that I'm not hard-headed and that I could change my mind on stuff, never thought of it from this perspective. But Jacob brings up a good point. Stop putting a salary cap in a league where you punish the teams that give a damn and try, or the owners that try, and start holding the owners at the bottom who don't try accountable, and put a spending floor in there. So Nick Kirby had said, Jacob, should we have no salary cap in the NFL too? I'm guessing that would not work out very well for the Bengals.
That's true. And my response to that was, well, Kirby, we've had a salary cap in the NFL forever, so I don't care.
Yeah.
And that's how sports work. If there's change, you get mad about it, and if it exists forever, you don't realize where the faults are. I mean, if you break it down, salary cap in every sport is stupid, and it makes no sense. You should let owners spend as much money as they want, but it's
Just like any business out there.
It's always been that way in the NFL, so that's why I don't care. Maybe I should.
Yeah, no salary cap in the NFL
would be terrible.
Would be unfortunate.
Would be terrible.
Would be unfortunate.
It would be horrible.
How much money would they make? I mean, there's no limit to the amount of money they'd make. I mean, we're talking. I mean,
there would be 3 NFL teams.
Yeah, there would only be 3 legit teams.
I mean,
like there would be nothing.
There would be like $5 billion rosters.
Yeah, socialism only works in sports.
There's part of me too that would be like, okay, the Bengals, you draft Joe Burrow, you get T. Higgins in the same draft, Jamar the next year. You know you only get 4 years with Joe Burrow because the New York markets will outbid you to keep him.
Yeah.
The only thing that would do is force Cincinnati, well, we got to spend lights out through this 4 years and take advantage of this Joe Burrow window. But then you're right, it's a never-ending cycle.
Or you don't spend and say we have to capitalize on the only profitable window we're ever going to have by not putting money into the team and just selling jerseys. I think you'd see both things.
Like Joey Votto in Cincinnati, it's going to give him the biggest, one of the biggest contracts in baseball, and then just say, all right, well, at least you have a guy to come cheer for at the ballpark for the next decade. So, no, and by the way, I don't really have a good answer for why I don't want a spending floor in the NFL and only in Major League Baseball. But like, football's not broken. Baseball is.
That is the best.
Baseball's broken.
That's the best point.
And it is. And football would be broken if we went that route. Maybe, I don't know, the NFL's king, but it would not be as lucrative as it is now because we've talked about it, worst to first. The Houston Texans, the Washington Commanders, the Bengals win 2 games and 2 years later they're in a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like the parity around the league and the turnaround. Now you could say that would be in baseball. There's so many more moving parts.
Someone will say the Rangers last year, but huge outlier.
Mm-hmm. And
the Astros played in how many consecutive CSs before this year?
Yeah.
7?
So either way, I just think that would force, because that's been my biggest knock on the Guardians and the others, and it would help the Reds. As Reds fans, I'd be ecstatic if they said, hey, you have to spend at least this much.
That'd be awesome.
That would be great. Because you're not, and in baseball too, it's not like it's guaranteed. Now, again, we're watching 2 teams go head-to-head in the World Series right now, 2 of the highest spending teams, and you had 3 of the highest spending teams in baseball in the AL and NLCS, of course. But overall, the Reds window right now would be interesting because all of their stars were all brought up recently. They're cheap. This is the only example for the Reds. The Castellinis need to treat this Reds roster like an NFL team right now. You have your star players on rookie quarterback contracts. That's why I'm mad that the Reds haven't been more aggressive spending-wise, is because it's not like, oh, man, we have 3 or 4 really good players that you brought in from free agency and paid really good money to. You're not paying any of your young stars anything. You even got the deal that they did get done with Hunter Green was a steal. You were either going to get an average pitcher at market rate or you were going to get a Cy Young caliber pitcher on a bargain deal. And it looks like they got him on a bargain deal. My point is they haven't had to pay anybody. So now's the time to go spend dollars in the offseason if you're the Reds and take advantage of the fact that you're not paying Ellie, you're not paying Matt McClain, you're not paying Spencer Steer, you're not paying Christian Encarnacion-Strand, you're barely paying your ace pitcher in Hunter Green. Nick Lodolo, you're not paying. Your bullpen's fairly affordable. There's no excuse for them not to spend money right now. They need to approach the Cincinnati Reds offseason like an NFL team because it's rare to have this many really good players on very cheap contracts because they're not due to be paid yet. So I would take advantage of that. We know how baseball works. It doesn't always work, though.
The issue is if you lock up, those other guys, then you have to worry about those contracts and then pay our guys at some point down the line. And maybe that's the goal. Maybe we're not going to pay Ellie De La Cruz, and we know that. Maybe they do know that going into it. We're not going to be able to afford him. There's just no rational way to think about that. So I would go all in, like you just said. I think if there are certainly doubts in the clubhouse or in the front office, that you're not going to be able to get the deal done with Ellie, and I think there is serious doubts, at least in my brain, that you're not going to be able to get a deal done, then why would you not capitalize on this situation?
Same thing with Pittsburgh with Skeens right now.
It's not like the Reds' payroll is high. I mean, I know they spent relatively well coming into last season. Payroll is still bottom 10 in Major League Baseball, bottom 7, I think. So take advantage of it. Let's go see what we can do next year.
I just want to know what the Bally Sports thing or FanDuel TV, because
as of right now, the Reds are not on FanDuel TV, whatever that is.
Everything.
Because they haven't picked up the contracts, I don't believe, of the other MLB teams. I think it's just the Braves as of right now.
And even if they did restructure deals, it probably wouldn't be the same dollars that they were getting from Bally. That got them in the same. If you're FanDuel, you're not going to absorb.
Didn't work for Bally.
Problem. Yeah, you're not going to absorb the same problems. So who knows? But either way. All right. Well, you guys got anything else as we wrap this up?
I think it's good.
We're good. We're good. We're
we're
good.
solid.
Chatterbox Bengals tonight.
That's
the
right.
Bengals, the
Tonight.
Bengals show tonight.
7P. Chatterbox Bengals. Craig and I. Break it all down.
Dialed in right after this.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. All right, good stuff. We're gonna talk.
I'm dialed in.
You're dialed in.
Gonna be
You
momentarily.
Case, you got to ask Tom about his 700 experience today.
Okay. Yeah.
Because he was answering calls last night.
That's
I
right.
don't know how it went.
Big
Did
time.
you call in?
I did not. I should have, though.
You should have.
You should have been. First time caller, long time listener.
Son of
Could've
your
gone
father.
that route.
That would have thrown him off.
That would have.
All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll do this again tomorrow. Until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.